Hey everybody, welcome to You'll Probably Agree. I have Mark Crosscheck on. Crosscheck, I got it wrong.
It's
Whatever. I'm
okay.
bad with last names.
Mark the
Uh,
movie man. That's why I go by movie man because my last name is just so Polish.
and
So,
let me tell
you
you,
know.
man, he is the man. Like Mark is the Batman guy. Like this dude's like, I got this, I got that Batman stuff, and I'm like, oh shit, I got that too. I got my cow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that
Anyways,
cow. Yeah.
oh my god, yeah, and it smells good. I love the smell of rubber. You know.
Well,
But
that might be a
anyways,
little too TMI, but that's okay.
okay. I'm gonna do Batman ASMR videos with this
There
cow
you go.
and be
There
like,
you
I'm
go.
putting it on. But anyways, we are going in chronological order through all the Batman films. This is an
Oh
ambitious
yeah.
project, almost as ambitious as Ms. Matt Reeves' 3 hour Batman. It's 3 hours officially. I got the press thing. Oh boy, here we go for a ride.
An opus. You know what? But everything just from the trailers, and that's all I've been keeping it to is the trailers so much.
Have you seen
From
the
what I
Jimmy Kimmel sketch?
No, I
Okay,
haven't.
good.
No,
Okay, don't.
I've
It's
been trying to avoid most of the reviews, though some people that got early, very early screenings are showing trust us, and I'm just like, it looks fun. I was
yeah.
kind of leery when I saw the first promo shots, but since I saw the trailers, I'm like, if anything, cinematically, the way it's shot is going to be shot, it's going to be like Nolan's going to be scratching his head, going, "Ah, damn, I should have did that." Uh,
It looks like it's ripped straight from the comics. It
it
really
does.
does. And it's
Yeah.
like I don't read comics a lot. I'm more associated with Batman through the cinematic universe,
Yeah.
which I'll get into later. But like Batman
Mm.
Begins, he made a big deal about killing, and I'm like, why do you fucking care all of a sudden? Because I saw the movie. So, anyways,
Yeah,
let's.
Tim Burton plays with that loosely. So
Yeah. Um. Anyways, I never saw 1966 Batman. I saw the cartoon series as a little boy,
see,
and
now I feel old, but that's okay. The
no,
animated series, I've got I got it on Blu-ray. My friend got me the series on Blu-ray, which comes with also Mask of the Phantasm on Blu-ray, and it comes with a book and three little Funko Pop figures. It's a wonderful collection. So I've got that, but it was released on Entrada. If you're not familiar
whoa.
with Entrada, there's two volumes. I've got both volumes where they release music from pretty much the entire series on it. Entrada does these things where they get the original music and they try their best to either replicate it with their orchestra, which does very good, or pull from master tapes if they can get them. But yeah, but this is volume two. I've got volume one as well. Volume one is a lot thinner, but volume two, this has 4 discs on it, and each disc has about 75 minutes of music on it.
Oh my god. Now the composer of that she actually did well. All right, I said
Sure.
before we were rolling, we're gonna go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And we're already starting to do that, but that's
Well,
okay.
we
God,
can we can
Mask of the
backtrack and do
Phantasm
89
counts. I
first.
forgot. That's one of them.
Yes, it
That's
does.
1993.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think Returns came out in 92.
92, and then
Wow.
yeah, because 89 was Batman. You had the 66 one. That's all anybody knew of Batman as far as live action until Burton came along. And the 66 one is fun though. And the reason the 66 one is fun, even though as campy and cheesy, and you've got bat shark repellent, and you've
Yeah.
got Robin, you've got the bat boat, you got a bat helicopter. I used to have the Hot Wheels of the bat helicopter at one point. But you had all of those wonderful campy elements, but you had so much talent in the villains.
Mm.
A lot of people watched the series of 66 for the villains more so than Batman, because I mean, don't get me
Mhm.
wrong, Adam West and my good friend, that's her Batman. You know how you have your doctor, like they say for Doctor Who, her Batman was Adam West 66 Batman, and he was fun. But you really watched it for the villains, because you had Sid Caesar, you had Grisham for the Joker in that one. You had Burgess Meredith for the Penguin, and I believe it was Lee Merriweather was doing the Catwoman for that one. It wasn't Eartha Kitt, unfortunately, because I love Eartha Kitt.
Mm.
But it was fun. It's actually a decent story, and it kind of disturbing in a way too. So that's
What
all
is the
anybody.
story to it? Because I never saw the
Um,
movie.
the Rogues Gallery get together and they create this device that dehydrates people into a powder. And so they go after the United Nations representatives, and they basically dehydrate the whole group and hold them hostage and ask for ransom from the world leaders. Otherwise, they would dump the powder. And, and Batman goes in and tries to rescue him. They're in Penguin's submarine. You've got,
Yeah, I remember that.
great
I remember
Joker
that. Yeah.
stuff. You got that wonderful, you've seen the GIF, I'm sure, kids out there, Batman running with the big bomb. That's where the shark repellent comes in, because
Hmm.
as he's in the helicopter trying to board Penguin's submarine, or getting off of it, a shark comes up and bites him, but he pulls out shark bat repellent and, and sprays it on the shark to get
And
it off of him,
smacks it too.
and
Like, I
smacks
mean,
it too. He
dude, you
punches.
want to know how tough Batman is? He will punch a shark in the head and
Yeah.
not be worried about being eaten. Although the shark was midair, so I think it was
Yeah,
biting
well,
him at the
yeah.
time too,
It was
right?
biting him though at the time. It was on his leg. Yeah, it like
Oh
was
yeah.
swallowing his leg
And
almost.
somehow, like, he's fine with it. Although he didn't have armor, he just had like tights
Well,
on
he had the
at the
tights,
time.
but he was Batman. So I mean,
Exactly, he's Batman. He can get away with anything.
the
I mean,
car was badass.
you could shove him in a prison in the middle of whatever Stan, and he could just somehow wind up in Gotham.
I,
But
I have it at work, but I have my friend got me the Hot Wheels of the original 66 Batman, which that car is just awesome. That car was phenomenal. But it did set some precedents for live action. And then, we had Superman, and that's really the
hmm
extent of your comic book movies at the time, until 89 Batman, which happened to be a very, I also have a poster book somewhere as well. I got shit everywhere.
dude, I got so
Oh,
much Batman stuff. It's insane.
but
Which we'll get
89,
into the. I love to get
yeah.
into the merchandise for '89, but yeah,
Oh yeah.
66. Like,
Mhm.
you're right. Richard Donner made superhero movies more than just
Yeah.
superhero movies. They tied to ancient mythology and all that. Sam Hamm, who was the producer on 1989 Batman, has an incredible story about
Mhm.
how he started a class on comic book movies in college, where he said there was this sort of competition, I guess you could call it,
Mhm.
where a bunch of students propose an idea for a class they should do, right? And Sam Hamm wanted to do a class on comic book movies. He talks to the man who's in charge of who's going to greenlight the program. And the man who's in charge of that program says to Mr. Hamm, "So I understand you want to make a class based on funny books. Why should I believe you?" He goes, "Do you know the story of Moses?" And he goes, "Sure. It's about a little boy whose village gets destroyed and he's put in a wicker basket and he's sent to these other people and he becomes one of their own and becomes kind of a hero. And he's like, that's great. Can you tell me the story of Superman? Because you told me before you're a friend of
Mhm.
your friend, you're a fan of his comics." He goes, "Yeah. Well, can you give me the story of Superman?" "Sure. It's about a kid from up the planet Kryptonite. It gets destroyed. He gets put in a little space vessel. He meets a family and he becomes one of the people." And he just stops and he goes, "Your class is accredited."
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
And from there,
Nice.
he became the writer of 1989's Batman.
Ah.
Because 89 Batman was a separation from 66 Batman. 66 Batman was sort of, I think Andy Warhol was behind that show. And you could definitely see, like, the acid and the mushrooms flying throughout that show. I mean, that show's a trip. And then we finally get to darker territory because Richard Donner proved with Superman that you can actually make a mythological figure
Mhm.
and you can take it seriously. And I mean, of course, not all of it seriously. You got,
No.
the guy going, "Mr. Luthor," and then, you got all the silliness and the camp,
Well, yeah.
but it's still. handled a character in a way that is akin to a human being. And with Batman 1989, it's not quite as substantive as Superman, but stylistically, it was a movie when even when it came out, I think some of the distributors said this is too dark. Like particularly the scene when they're inside the cathedral and
Hmm.
Batman's all bloodied up and he looks like he just spent a night at Galway Bay and drank too much and slammed against all the pews and they topple each over like
Oh,
dominoes. But 89 Batman. This movie was hugely influential on me. This was the
mm.
movie that made me want to make movies or write about movies or anything movies. Because I remember as a kid, I was like, Batman, that silly thing. And then I saw that movie and I went, whoa. And I listened because you are huge in the vinyl tracks and
Yes.
huge part of my childhood that got me into making movies is I could always tell when I didn't like a movie, and it was because of the score.
Yep.
And if your score is fantastic, I'll love it. And I remember listening on cassette tape, Danny Elfman's score, closing my eyes, imagining the Phantom of the Opera, but it was sort of like a story about a little boy who was physically deformed because of an incident, and then he grew up and he was an outcast because of that, and that's what caused him to be this sort of. And it was all just through listening. There's particularly that one track when they're driving through the woods into the Bat Cave, and you hear that choral arrangement of
Oh
people
yeah.
going hee ha sa
Yeah.
see. But show it, show me your bat
Sorry,
soundtrack.
I'm
You have to
showing it
show
here.
me it because it's beautiful, man.
I I've got the original I found a while back, the original pressing they did for the Batman. The one that you're talking about, I believe, is Descent into Mystery is the one
Mm.
that I believe is the song you're referring to. It's
Yeah.
um and then was it Mondo did this wonderful re-release of it. It's a gatefold with a wonderful art in it um of
Wow.
Joker's hideout, but they did this original release. It's the same track listing. They didn't add any other tracks, but the artwork for this vinyl is beautiful. uh but yeah, that's what stood out for me because the 89 Batman is one of those milestone films for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I was older when I in 89 I was I was, I was a freshman in high school. Okay, I was a freshman, but I was a big Bat fan. But we'd only really had the 66 Batman live action wise. I had watched that many times, that show on syndication. So this came out and I was already big Burton fan because of Beetlejuice and his earlier work. And I loved Danny Elfman's music. And when I heard this score, I was like, oh man, everything about this film hit me at that impressionable age when you're a teenager. And that was my movie milestone. It just influenced me, as you can tell, greatly. I just consumed it. I went to the theater 5 or 6 times, I think, at least, to see it. It was a huge movie. I don't think they expected it to take off as big as it did because Superman had kind of declined.
Mhm.
A little bit. You had a Superman 3 at one point, and that did do well. 2 was okay. They were like, what's going on here? Um, and yeah, so it was just it was wonderful, and the work that went into it, even for a Burton film. You read about the behind the scenes stuff of how he took over all the major big sound stages because they built Gotham. I
Mhm.
mean, later on they would use, they would use they would use actual locations like
Mhm.
New York or Chicago, but for Batman 89, they built nearly all the sets, and I think for
Yeah.
Returns too. And it was insane that you saw this, and then they didn't have a whole lot, but the way he shoots it, unless you're paying attention, you realize, yeah, the set isn't actually that huge that they're shooting on.
No, it's
Um,
not. It's probably like I don't know. Was it? It was a little set, really?
well, not I mean, not little, but because they were able to drive the Batmobile around, but you could see some building faces in the background that you saw in main shots before, so
Oh, okay.
like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
like along that lines. So, so first off, he just had the world that he built, this new world that people weren't expecting to see Batman, because up until this point we had bright colors and
Yeah.
Adam West, and the camp. So here you have this dark scene, and you have Batman in that wonderful outfit that he had. And then you had the Batmobile, right?
Yeah.
Here's that my 89 diecast
Ooh.
Ertl Batmobile. And then you had the Batwing.
Wait, bring up
Yes.
that Batmobile again. I was in another window. I want to make sure I give you the right. Oh my God! See, all I got is this wee man right here.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I've got uh here, I've got this one too.
Ah, there you go. See, that man was big on the toys. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
if you
Yeah, that
think about it,
actually, that one that you have, that's this one, I think, in the box that I have. It's
speaking of
the original one.
boxes,
You could still join the, oh, there you go.
yeah,
You
this
can
is
still
what I
join the
got.
collectors club if you really want. Uh,
I
oh, the
found
Bat
this
Jet.
at
Nice.
Real Chicago, go REEL Chicago, and even on the
Nice.
back they have the
Yeah. Oh, that's
all.
sweet.
Yeah, and on top
That's
of that,
sweet.
it came. It was still like no one put in the stickers or anything, and I'm like, should I get rid of this? And I'm like, no, I'm taking it out of the box. I'm gonna. This thing wanted to be played with for 30
Yeah.
years, and yeah, I mean,
And
you got the actual wing here with the cockpit.
oh, you nice. Oh, that's
The wing's
sweet.
still open. Like, or let me get it better when the transparency
Nice.
doesn't. Yeah,
Oh, that's
and even
sweet.
the spring still works. Yeah.
That is awesome. That is a thing of beauty.
I remember having that when I was a kid,
Yeah.
and like all those memories came flashing back
Oh God,
when
yeah.
I went in that store.
But regardless of how you felt about 89 Batman, that Batmobile is iconic. Yeah, I've got like 4 different version releases that they did of it. I've got a Bat phone. It's lost a wheel. Go figure, kind of funny. I've actually got a Bat landline phone. It's the Batmobile. And when it rings, the headlights light up. It's
Is that like your landline in your house?
we have it split, but
Uh,
yeah, for I've had that since I was a kid. But yeah, these are my diecasts I got as a gift a while back. But that shows you a little bit of the 89 Batman. Since we're showing it all, here's my wife got me the signed by Jack Nicholson and Michael Keaton, one of the
what?
signed tops collectible cards, which I don't have all of them yet. I'm working on getting all of them. I'm missing about 20 of them. But she got me like a this folder she gave to me for a present. She's like, here you go. And I'm opening it, and it had this card signed in it. It's got a Vicky Vale promo still signed as well, a certificate of authenticity for it. I'm like,
Now,
she
did you have
knows.
the VHS where they're like, if you want to get a Warner Brothers Batman, get a Warner Brothers ball cap?
Oh yeah, I've got that. I bought the Blu-ray when it came out with the booklet, and it came with the DVD, and I've got on VHS. I've got the VHS Batman as well on my shelf.
Oh my God.
So yeah, this film was huge for me. As you can see, I got the postcard on the back there. And then even when I went to go see it again when it was re-released, I literally saved the ticket stub from that 89 Batman release back in 2016. I saved it because a lot of people, well, you when you're a movie guy, there's certain movies that just that's the movie that it's like
Mm.
that. And this was it for me, just like it was for you. It was like, I got my Bat Blade as well.
Oh
So
my! Oh
I
yeah, I remember you showing that on.
yeah,
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 so that's a.
yeah.
I mean, talk about like if you ever killed a guy in self-defense. Now, I'm pretty sure the cops would be laughing. Like, wait a minute, so you killed a dude with a bat blade? Like, look,
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to say anything, but that's kind of cool. Dude,
It's sharp too, but yeah,
it looks sharp as fuck. That
it,
thing.
it, it is. And then I just got my wife just got me the replica batarang.
Oh,
So
hold on to that wife forever. And
yeah, I know, right? She knows me. But anyway, I guess long story short, yeah, the 89 Batman was influential, and it opened the door. We didn't even realize it at the time, but it opened the door for 90s superhero films where studios were trying to find their way, which led to the big superhero movies you have today, because those set the groundwork, either hit or misses. they set the groundwork for it. And Burton's Batman was big because it showed you don't have to have your comic book movie be too campy or extremely campy or bright in order to sell it to your audience. You can do a darker story. And that's what one of the many things I loved about it was that it showed studios, look, something other than Superman can be profitable if you do it right.
Well, they really distinguish between the difference between Batman and Superman. I'd say eternally, because they try to make him light again with Schumacher, and it didn't work out. Uh, but what they showed is like, yeah, Superman, he's for truth, justice, and the American way. Batman will just shoot you in the face with a machine gun in the Batwing, and yeah, that movie. I never knew it was a big deal that Batman didn't kill people because my introduction to him was the movie and then the
Yeah.
animated series, and Batman's whole thing was, I mean, in the animated series I don't think he killed, but I was
No,
really
he didn't
just
kill any. He
bored.
didn't kill anybody in the animated, but he definitely killed people. In the original and in Returns. He literally sets.
He
Well,
smiles before he kills the guy. He smiles in his face, straps a bomb to him, punches him, and knocks him over a bridge. Like, Batman doesn't even kill. He likes killing.
he likes killing. It's a darker Batman, and some people,
And I
who
love
like to.
that. I'm like, fuck it. Who cares? Like when I saw like Batman and these other things, and he's like, I don't kill. I'm like, you pussy. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, and he had to. He did in the '89 Batman, and some people, those who didn't know Batman from the comics, had no problems with it. I knew a little bit about him, but it did. It was something that never even dawned on me when I watched the movie, because the movie was such a different beast than most of the comics up until that point. So it was like, oh, okay, I hadn't even thought about it because it was a comic book movie, and when the Batmobile drops the bombs in front of the guys, and then the and that wonderful miniature blow up of the Acme factory, it was it was like, yeah, I'm like,
How many people died in that factory? Like, that's gotta be like over 100. No, maybe not over 100. Maybe about 100.
no, well, it was off hours. It was
Yeah,
off
it was
hours.
off hours. Like,
So
Batman made sure to check the schedule, and he's like,
he checked the
okay, I know that
schedule.
guy's an asshole. He can go.
But you had the wonderful performance of Joker, who at the
Mm-hmm.
time they picked Jack Nicholson, which he was very different than your Caesar Romero Joker.
Yeah.
It was very different from that, but still fitting for the Batman verse. He was a scary guy. And I remember the jokes about they made that Jack Nicholson was the highest paid actor in Hollywood at that year, and they made jokes at the Oscar about it, which he didn't mind at all. But
Well, no, he
um
just sitting there with his paycheck and his whatever,
whatever, going
whatever
to his
drug he had that day.
going to
And
the Lakers games or whatnot. But
oh man, Jack Nicholson actually like offered like I think like $1,000 to a buddy of mine for like Bulls Lakers tickets one day.
oh, did he really?
Yeah, and my buddy like still like kept the tickets. I'm like, are you stupid? Nah.
No, no, here you go, Jack. That's fine.
Yeah.
But his Joker was different but fitting for Batman, and he did a wonderful job. I loved Nicholson's Joker. He made
Yeah.
him scary. He made him scary crazy. And you do see in the all the iterations of Joker you get on screen
Mhm.
after him, all the iterations were influenced in some way by his performance. Yeah, they made up their own, but you can still see hints of Jack here and there for what
Mhm.
he did.
Mhm.
And that was what stood out for me too. Here you had both Keaton, who everybody, the the guy from Gung Ho. What?
Mr. Mom?
Mr.
Yeah.
Mom is playing Batman, but you see him in the role, you're like, I can believe it. I love his Bruce Wayne.
Repeats history, man. People are like, Robert Pattinson? Twilight? Heath Ledger? Brokeback Mountain? Look
Right?
how Heath turned out. And with Robert, we'll see. But so far from what I see, I'm like, I've heard his voice in an extended clip because I'm weak and I just have to watch it at a certain point. When YouTube was like constantly shoving it in my face and I'm scrolling, I'm like, fine, I'll watch it. Yeah,
I'll click it. Fine. Yeah,
and then I see it, I'm like, yeah, that's what Batman would sound like. Like, when I watch it, I'm like, yeah, they did it, man.
it you pair it with the music, like you said, it was a perfect pairing. Burton and Elfman are like Spielberg and Williams. When you put those two together, they just get each other. They get the film that they're making. They know each other. They're friends in real, outside of work as well. But they're on that same level and vibe, and they click, and their music matches. The music matches the visuals so well, and it just marries everything together in the '89 Batman that no one had really seen a comic book film on this scale like this before.
Yeah.
It set that precedent, and it the fact that it made bank, so much bank. I tell you, I was pissed when I learned Home Alone beat the original Batman for top box office, because for a while '89 Batman was top of the box office until Home
Mm.
Alone came along, and then
Mm.
it beat but
Yeah, you're
uh
like, you guys want to see that crap instead of Batman? Although, like, Home Alone's great, but in a different way.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But it showed the studios that you could this is something that you can make money off of. And so you had some of those mixed successes after this. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles came out, and that was actually really good. That was a good adaptation. That blew me away
Yeah.
that it was better. But I would say that part of its influences were because of what they did in Batman. You had Blade come out. Blade was wonderful. I mean, the '90s was an interesting time for comic book movies. It really was.
Yeah.
Good and bad, but it was interesting to see that kind of movement for making comic book films, and they were trying to figure out how they were doing it. And when they finally were figuring it out, they laid that groundwork to where then Marvel took it to the next level, and Nolan took it to the next level
Hmm.
of where they could go with a comic book film. But that '90s started with the '89 Batman, really, and it showed what you could do. And that's why I love this film so much, is that and there's an appreciation for it on so many levels, not just personal, but just what it did for the industry as a whole. And that's what I love about this film, is just everything about it. It just influenced me so much. I started getting the comics again after I saw it. Yeah, it's just one of those films for me that.
It's amazing because yeah, I think it got so many people into making movies and loving movies, and I mean, I'll say, like, is the plot amazing or anything? No,
No.
but it's the style, and it proved that you could take material based on anything, and
Mhm,
you can create your own vision with it.
mhm,
And it really kind of introduced the idea of mise en scène to a lot of people, even if they don't know what mise en scène means. It means like everything in the scene. It's like whatever is in the frame. It's like it's the production design behind it. It's the cinematography behind it that really works. I mean, if you look at Roger Pratt's cinematography,
mhm.
there's an ongoing joke like, oh, it's a DC film when you have to turn up the brightness on your TV. And I think Batman started that because the style we see with the DC films today
Mhm,
are heavily influenced from Batman. As a matter of
mhm.
fact, like most movies are, it was the movie that set the precedent. And it had memorable characters too. Jack Nicholson's Joker, even if you hear some of there's a particular laugh from Heath Ledger's Joker in The Dark Knight that sounds exactly like Jack. It's when he's upside down in
Mhm.
his final scene, and he's giving his final monologue about, we're here to equal each other out, and I'm always going to be killing, you're always going to be striving for goodness, but in the end, we're the same. And as he's dangling, he goes like, and I'm like, that was Jack. Like, that was fucking Jack right there, and
Mhm.
Jack really set the precedence, and he knew what to do. Like, there is where it's on my, I don't know, I gotta click on, I have a million links open, but I gotta, I gotta click on
Oh
my
yeah.
DVD of this, and on
Mhm.
the back, there's a wonderful documentary called Legends of the Dark Knight: The
Mhm.
History of Batman. Or no, I'm sorry. That's the wrong one. That's a different one. Shadows of the Bat: The
Mhm.
Cinematic Saga of the Dark Knight, and parts 1 through 3, right? And they have others for this extends to the Schumacher films as well. And Nicholson said in that documentary that I know what the kids like. They want you to be mean, but they love it when you're really bad. Like the worse you are, the more they love it. Like Jack knows his shit,
Oh yeah.
and that's how he did that. And he did one of the most brilliant moves that most actors do today. He said, "Look, I don't care how much you pay me with this movie, just give me the returns and the toys."
He
And
knew. He knew. Yeah.
back then, like the toys weren't a big deal, but now
No.
the toys are fucking everything. They make so much money, and he made a lot of money off of that movie.
Oh yeah. He made bank off of Batman.
Yeah.
Even if he may have felt that was just some silly comic book film, it was so big. He made some serious bank. He's a veteran. He knew what to where the writing on the wall was with this film. And yeah, he did. And but deservedly so, because what helps define most of your superheroes, regardless of what people may want to try to Marvel or DC, what partly defines your superhero is their villain, is
Mm-hmm.
their counterpart. Is their villain an equal or worse, in some way, or even more bigger personality than your hero? you
Mm-hmm.
know and I think some of your biggest superheroes, they need the big villain who feels like it could go toe to toe. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's one of those great things about Superman, was the fact that his villain, his arch nemesis, was a brilliant human who took it to him. I mean, but he had such a personality. He had to be a grandiose character. Here, Jack Nicholson has such a screen presence. I mean,
Yeah.
he eats up scenery for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and he does so in this film, but it's fitting for the Joker. you know
You could just
uh
tell he was having so much fun on that set. Like you could tell he just loved being bad because when you listen to the behind the scenes
mhm.
documentaries of it, or even the audio commentary on the DVD, like Jack Palance was just being a dick. And he's
Oh
like,
yeah.
I've been on this many sets and I haven't seen it. Jack Nicholson would just walk up to Tim Burton and be like, just tell me what you want. I got it. And he was always super supportive of Tim.
Mhm.
Tim Burton, I'm saying Tim like I know him, but Tim Burton was, before Batman, he was Pee Wee's Big Adventure, and then he was
Beetlejuice.
Beetlejuice, which led to the casting of Michael Keaton. And he was an odd choice, but somehow the studio saw something in his vision, in his eye, similar to when they hired Peter Jackson for Lord of the Rings. Because
Mhm.
Peter Jackson, he was known for like B campy horror movies and stuff like that.
Freaking Meet the Feebles and Dead
Yeah.
Alive. Dead Alive
Yes.
was the biggest States movie I think that was released of his, because that got actual played in theaters, and that people knew him on. And
Yeah.
but you're right. Burton also set that trend where studios took a chance on these indie, quirky, mostly horror background guys to do these big budget superhero films, and it paid off. It paid off with Raimi. It paid
Mhm.
off with Burton. It paid off with Peter Jackson doing Lord of the Rings, which ends up becoming one of the ultimate trilogies.
Yeah.
They get these guys, and even not Marvel still continued the trend. Freaking James Gunn came from Trauma. For crying
Oh yeah.
out
Well, he
loud.
got fired because he did that whole rape scene
Well,
with
yeah,
the former Elliot or Ellen. I'm sorry, Ellen Page, Elliot Page now.
yeah.
But but then again, that was a whole. But yeah, he was a guy where it's like we go off the indie world, we see the vision of the filmmaker, and we want to we want to respect that vision. And in respecting that vision, it paid off in spades. I think of Michael Keaton. Now that was a controversial choice at the
Oh
time.
God,
I
yeah.
mean, he was known as the comedian, and he's not built like Batman. He's all doughy faced and out of shape. And this is from fans of the comics. They were upset
Right.
about that because they thought, oh God, we're gonna get Adam West again. We're gonna get cheesy again. So in a last minute panic move, they released the trailer for Batman early, right? And people would go out, see the trailer after they
Mhm.
purchased maybe like $5 at the time a ticket to see the movie. Which $5 back then is like, I don't know, $20 today. Who knows? I'm bad with math. And
$5 was $5 was average for your film watching for an evening show.
yeah,
You got 250 to $3 for a matinee,
hmm.
but $5 was about average. you
Yeah.
know
So like they'd pay that, and then after they saw the trailer, they'd leave the movie. And
yep.
they made that trailer to sell people on Michael Keaton as Batman, to make them know, look, we're not going campy, we're not going corny. Tim Burton didn't even know about the backlash like until he heard about it, and he went, "Wow, really? Like people are gonna like kill me and Michael?" And what's that
granted
trailer?
now granted now kids, they had to write in to the magazine, and the editor had to choose the letter to show about the outrage. You didn't have internet to where they're like, oh my god, did you see that Keaton they literally had to write in.
There was a major publication that had a whole article. I think it was like on their front page. I mean, I could be wrong, but it was about what the studio was doing wrong and why it was wrong that they were casting Michael Keaton and all that. Once that trailer came out and people saw it, they were sold.
Mhm.
Once they had that opening scene where there's the man on the roof, the crook, the whatever who
Yeah.
steals from the lady and the family. When he grabs the guy, puts him up to his face, and says, "I'm Batman."
Oh
Everyone went,
dude,
"It's
it's
Batman."
Batman. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm like, here's my money, take it now. I
Yeah.
want to see this
And they
now.
sold VHSs of that trailer on like top market throughout it. And of course, there was the whole Batmania. You couldn't go anywhere without the logo that you're wearing right now. That logo, 30 plus years from now, we still use as the Batman logo, which is
Mhm.
funny because on his suit in that movie, it's
It's got the
actually,
legs. Yeah.
yeah, it's inaccurate. It looks weird. It's like, what? No, what is that? But then of course the actual logo is what we all know and see
Right.
today. It was the logo from the opening. That's one of my favorite opening credits. When you're
Oh
just
yeah.
going through the crevices, the bat signal, you don't know what the hell it is. And then when you finally zoom out, as I love the fact, like, what was that made out of? Was that like concrete? That it was.
I'm I'm not sure what it was made
Not
out of,
literally made
but
out of, but like what it looks like. It looks like something that's hard and rough and intimidating, and that's Batman. And they got it so right. Like for people who didn't know anything about the character, they went, "That is a cool character,
mhm.
and he is a badass," and that's what took off from there. And
and and the music played so much of a part. That's the thing.
mm-hmm.
That's one of those films where the music added so much, especially to that opening. I mean, that Danny Elfman's opening theme for Batman. It's like my buddy had a huge, like, expensive stereo system, and I was like,
Oh,
"Hey, could we play this?" I mean, big subwoofer back at the time when that wasn't a huge deal in the theater. We
I know
played, and
exactly what you're talking about.
he
Yeah.
cranked it up a bit. We vibrated his walls when he got, with the big crescendo. And I'm just like, this is awesome.
Yeah. See, I remember playing that cassette tape of Batman. I think I said this before the air.
Yeah.
And I closed my eyes, imagining a rendition of the Phantom of the Opera to the score. And
I
and
still got
we
my
had,
cassette.
yeah, we still, oh my God. Wow. Yeah, I've been trying to find that cassette. Every time I see my folks on the weekend, I'm like, where is that Batman cassette? Um, we had those big subwoofers at the time, and that's when they had the wooden casing to them,
Yeah.
and they painted it brown, and it was beautiful. I actually would love to, like, if I had a house, I would have it kind of like look like a wood cabin, something
Mhm.
like that. And I remember we had those big speakers, and they would vibrate on the. I mean, those subwoofers are heavy. I was a little kid. I was climbing up on one at one point to grab something. I
Uh-huh.
fell off, I didn't have shoes on at the time. The subwoofer landed on my big toe. I had
Ooh,
to go in the
ow.
hospital, and you could just see like little blood marks across the floor leading up to the car because
Ouch.
we listened
Yeah.
to music on that kind of sound system. And
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
Danny Elfman's score was iconic. The cinematography, pull up
Hmm.
my cheat sheet of IMDb here, was done by Roger Pratt. And yeah, he did like 12 Monkeys, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Is that 94? That's a Kenneth Branagh directed one. I
Yeah,
actually
with
really,
De Niro as Frankenstein,
yeah.
another interesting casting for a film.
Yeah,
Uh
that one was kind of like Anton Furst or for Furst. He did the production design to Batman with that very gothic set. You saw the man, here's another
and
comic looking for a set. Sorry, pal, can't reply to you right now.
I'm
Uh,
glad you bring up cinematography because you were mentioning, people talk about how dark the film is, but they I whoever they got for the lighting guy for those sets, mad props to that guy because you still had separation between your characters and the costumes and everything, though you had so much dark and black going on, but yet you could still see the wings of Batman when he
yeah,
extends them out. You could still see the details on the Batmobile. So whoever did the lighting with the cinematography, man, props, because that could have been easy at all.
yeah. That movie set the precedent, and then the sequel comes out.
Returns, yeah.
Yeah, Batman Returns, which I liked it as a kid. As an adult, I like it, but in a different way. Where is it as good as the original? No, I think it's an example of a movie where the director uses his vision, and maybe someone should have held him back a bit. But at the same time, I respect it for being so wildly fucked up and different
It's
that it
so
makes sense. I
it's
remember
so
walking out.
sexually subversive.
Very. I didn't notice it as a kid. Um, on the Shadows of the Bat documentary, like I think Tim Burton and then the screenwriter who did the movie with him. I don't have his name at the top of my
Mhm.
head, but imagine how Tim Burton dresses and imagine what his best friend would be, and
Yeah.
that's the screenwriter for that movie. Um, he basically said like audiences were walking out of the theater, like children were crying, uh, parents looked flabbergasted, shocked, whatever. And that rings very true because I remember my mother walked out of that theater and she just looked. I still remember how she looked. She looked so confused after that movie came out. She's like, "What was that?" Because where Batman was dark, it still wasn't uh disturbing, screwed up. Um, it's still probably the darkest comic book movie I've ever seen.
It's
Because it involves the plot to Batman Returns is about sort of people who have a connection to Batman in a metaphorical way. They're all
Mhm.
animal people, right? You have Catwoman who gets pushed out of a building by Max Shrek. And after Max Shrek, aka Wabba Wabba, plays her, Christopher Walken, that was how I had to remember his name. Um, Cats like bite her finger, and she gets magical powers that turn her into a cat.
Well,
The,
there weren't actually powers. I mean, it woke up. I wouldn't say she had like powers. I mean, she suddenly became very gymnastic and she could work some things. But I will say it wasn't like Halle Berry's Catwoman.
oh god, well that movie doesn't exist.
She woke up and she had a completely different change of personality. I would say more so than anything, and a bit of awakening. I'm not sure magical powers, but she did become very. She gained abilities, but they weren't like she could talk to cats. But
Mm.
didn't mean to cut you off, but I just I wouldn't
No,
say
you're good.
magic. I never caught magical powers, but I did catch that it was just kind of opened up and an awakening for her um with it. But yeah, the animal people, and then the reject uh, uh penguin played Danny DeVito. Oh my god.
Now that was Danny DeVito just being pure Frank Reynolds, Danny DeVito. That role catered towards him. Where there was another actor who liked what he was doing. But here's the problem I had with Batman Returns as an
Mhm.
adult, more than I did with as a kid. As a kid, I couldn't understand that maybe something with the movie wasn't clicking because I kept watching it again and again because I liked the toys and stuff
Mhm.
like that. But I think something wasn't working, and now as an adult, I see it, and it's because everyone is screaming at the top of their lungs throughout the movie, or really just Danny DeVito.
Just
Just,
Danny DeVito, he
yeah,
usually is, yeah.
just like throughout the whole movie, he's like, ah, blah, blah. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. Like, I guess it works for the character, but today I'm like, it is just one of the most annoying, incessant voices I've heard in a long time. But Batman Returns, I find fascinating because this is solely a director's vision. This
Mhm.
is Tim Burton saying, okay, I want to put in all the crazy stuff I always wanted to put in a movie, and I'm going to do this through returns here. And the payoff isn't as successful, yet my level of respect is heightened because it's a movie no one could ever make again,
Mhm.
really, in terms of a commercial comic book film, because you involve infant children who are going to be put inside of a train to be murdered.
Murdered.
And I, Jesus, what? We have a guy whose nose gets bit off and there's blood flying everywhere. There's local municipal politics that's the driving force of the film. Actually, the main villain of it actually is Christopher Walken's Max
Max Shrek.
Shrek,
Yeah.
who actually was probably outside of Catwoman the most fascinating villain in that
Mhm.
movie. Now that was a film that Batman only got, I think, like what, 20 minutes or less of screen time, and not just Bruce Wayne slash Batman, just Michael Keaton in
Michael
general.
Keaton. Yeah, Michael Keaton in general,
Yeah.
if you look at it, does not get a whole lot of screen time in Batman Returns versus what you had in Batman.
Hmm.
Because you had so many characters. This was, unfortunately, this opened the trend to, let's see how many villains we could pack in. The one thing I will say that Burton gets away with it that other movies I think missed later was that Catwoman was kind of a gray area. So I mean, she was kind of a villain, but she was mostly just going after Shrek, where the Penguin was your true tried and true villain. Catwoman was kind of in between Batman and Penguin. She was kind of her own thing, not quite like bad guy.
Hmm.
She wasn't necessarily good either. She had her own motivations, but she was mostly focused on Max Shrek for revenge for what he did to her. And, she went from mousy woman to this really, just very liberated person.
She was very
Um,
woke for that time. I mean, like,
yeah,
we have not got like a strong female character. We didn't get someone who, like, not only strong female, but she is scary as shit in that movie.
she is. She's very scary,
Yeah.
especially later on in the film when she's got when her costume is a little disheveled or ripped, and you got hair kind of sticking out. Just before she does Shrek in there at the end there. The
Mhm.
hair poke at the way she looks there is friggin' scary.
Oh, speaking of scary, after she kills Max Shrek and she puts the taser in his mouth that causes the electricity, and then Batman takes
Yeah,
away all the debris, there's that skeleton of him.
I know.
Whoa. Like,
This
this
film.
movie is fucked up. Like, that's the best way to define Batman Returns, and I respect it for that, but what did you think seeing it?
Oh, I loved it when I was younger. Again, I was in my teenage years, so I respected it a lot more. I will
Ah.
say I had a crush on Pfeiffer at the time
Oh,
because
who didn't? I still have a
92.
crush on her from that
I
movie.
do, yeah. 92, I was 16, 17 at that age. I think I hadn't quite turned 17 yet at that age, but So it was like one of those things where this played right to my certain tendencies at the time, and I just dug the visuals and just how batshit crazy it was. It's like, wow, this is a big screen movie, and this movie is just dark and crazy. And then as I've gotten older now and watched it many times, I didn't quite pick up just how subversive this film is in so many ways that, yeah, you're right. You couldn't make a comic book film like this nowadays with as dark and serious and kinky as it is, as exploring so many dark corners of humans in it. It just, and Max Shrek ends up being the lightest villain out of them. I mean, he's the most serious, he's the heavy, but at the same time, his major motivations are politics and greed. you,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know but I loved it. I've got on my YouTube channel, it hasn't been fully heavily striked yet. It was minor striked. I don't get monetization anyway, so I don't care. But I have on my YouTube channel the prime time special they did, the Bat, the Cat, and the Penguin, a
Yes.
half-hour primetime show where they did behind the scenes and interviews for promoting the upcoming release of Batman Returns. And I have that because I haven't been able still to find that specific special, even on all the releases, anywhere. So I figured I'll take a chance and release it. And watching it again, it's interesting to see how they promoted and pushed this film. And then you watch the film and you go, boy, I wonder if they regret kind of promoting.
Yeah. Um, I mean they had to promote it anyways, but during that time, that movie did not go over well with audiences,
No, no.
particularly the heads of McDonald's, because when that movie came out, I repurchased all the toys. I don't have my penguin thing,
Mhm.
but yeah, they had these little toys that
Yep.
really didn't resemble much from the
Mm-mm.
movie. Like that, like Batman's boat is probably the closest thing to the movie. And here, you press his head down, it
I
comes
love the
out.
Batboat. Batboat looked awesome.
Yeah, this comes out, but like
Yeah.
still the fans are. I'm wondering if they kept these on because like if the middle part came out, it looks too much like a you know what. Um,
phallic symbol.
I
What?
mean, speaking of a sexually driven film, do you think that I never thought about it, but I always kind of thought about it in the back of my head when he squeezes in between the buildings?
It's so evident everywhere in this film.
Yeah. Well, there's that line in the movie, just a piece of pussy I've been looking for.
Yeah, just the pussy I've been
Yeah,
looking
just a
for.
pussy.
And
I made
and,
it
and,
worse, but
and yeah, just the pussy I've been looking for when Catwoman shows up on the bed of in the upper area just after the Penguin has been handling in fact, he's coming up because he bit the nose of the guy, and then they have a whole bunch of people showing up there, and there's women, these young women who want to help him in his campaign because he's going by Cobblepot, his actual name.
yeah.
And he puts the pin on, and he with his flipper, and he sits there and he puts the pin on. He actually gropes the girl, and he comes up, and he's like,
Oh
I
yeah,
could
he
get
lifts it on her boobs for a second. He's like, let me get
I
that
could
on
get
you.
I could get used to this, politicians. It's about helping people, assisting people, groping people.
Groping
And then he sees
people.
Catwoman. And can you tell I've watched this a lot? And he goes,
Oh,
"Oh,
I
just
know it
the
line by line. I've
just
seen
just the
it.
pussy I've been looking for." And she's all dolled up in her, tight leather homemade outfit with the
She's
stiletto
laying on the
boots.
bed with her ass hanging out in the back. Like,
She's just
come on,
and
man.
and she sits there and she goes, I want to talk to you about the bat. He's like, oh well, I've got such and such. He's gonna blow her up. He's like, no, the fly in our ointment. And he goes, ointment, scented or unscented. I mean,
Jesus Christ. Yeah.
well, what I heard of the story is that Burton hadn't planned on doing a sequel. He
Hmm.
didn't he didn't plan on doing anything more, and they called him and gave him money. And Burton is under, if everybody wonders why Burton picks the projects he does, he always said, I do the big budget films like the Batman films and that to get the money so I can make the smaller films. So he does it. They gave him, he'd be dumb to turn down the money for Batman Returns. So he's like, okay, oh yeah, by the way, here's creative control. He's like, Okay. And he comes up with this film that's just wow. And but he used that money, then you get movies like Big Fish, which are wonderful films.
Yeah, he's a
But
great
what
director. It's just he needs to.
he someone did
He needs
someone
to do
needed to
more.
remind him that it was a children's movie, that you're still marketing it towards kids because it's a comic book film,
Yeah, that's why you
which
can never get an R-rated Batman.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's why. Yeah, because they still have that toy merchandise marketing, especially after the first one and all the toys and stuff blew up. They're like, oh, we've got, you know, we're not just, Lucasfilm ain't the only one that can make money off of toys. Look at this. So then Returns comes out, and then yeah, I love Returns for all different reasons than I love Batman. But at the same time, I get the reason why it fell from grace. And it is unfortunate because the studios then went extreme. And that's how we ended up getting Joel Schumacher for 2 movies.
Yes, and that's what led to it, which is the McDonald's thing. Was McDonald's hit up Tim Burton? They said, "What's that black stuff coming out of the penguin's mouth? What's all?" And that's why we ended up getting toys like Catwoman and a little Catmobile
In
with a
their
little
Catmobile. There's no
tail going back and
Catmobile.
forth. Yeah,
Yeah.
like where the fuck was this in the movie? I don't remember this. Uh, but that's because that movie wasn't very marketable. So
Mm-mm.
they panicked. They very politely told Tim Burton, "So what else do you want to work on?" And Tim Burton goes, "Well, I had this idea for a third Batman." We're like, "Yeah, but what else do you want to do?" And they said, "Well, what else do you want?" He goes, he's like, "Okay, guys, what's going on here?" Or he
Yeah.
says something like, "No, no, no, I know what you're doing. You don't want me involved with the film, blah, 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 blah."
Mm-hmm.
And they divorced from him. We get Joel Schumacher, and we have a whole episode about Batman Forever that I filmed back in. I looked at the footage, man. I had like a thirst trap shirt on or something.
You had it work. You were working it. You were working it. Yeah. Well, you were on vacation, so you were
Oh,
when we recorded that. You were on vacation at the time when we did
what a
that
vacation
episode.
it was too. Oh my God, I am like a Wisconsin eight. Anyways, what I was saying was, I think that's like a Trump thing to say, rating people by numbers. But uh, to briefly surmise Forever, this was a film that kind of didn't know if it wanted to be campy or be dark.
hmm They
And
tried to toe the line with it. And when I did it for my podcast a few years ago, I did a whole Bat month.
yeah.
I realized that my hatred was misplaced after watching all the movies back to back, because I used to despise Batman and Robin. I wrote a whole web page back in
Mm.
GeoCities days. Yes, I'm old. Back in GeoCities day, but a whole web page dedicated to my rant for Batman and Robin. And then after watching them for my podcast all back to back and noticing what they were doing, I realized my hatred actually is more for Batman Forever than Batman and Robin,
Mm.
because yeah, that film really they even try to work in the sexual subversiveness and the darkness
Oh God, I wrote Nicole Kidman like
with
in her like no clothes on, sleeping nude, and she
yeah.
walks out and she's like, "Oh, I've been waiting for you." And Batman smiles in a shot, and it just looks fucking weird.
And he says the line, "It's the car, chicks dig the car." It's like, what are you freaking doing? But never mind, her character literally like is ready to grab Batman and take him to bed within the first minute of the film, because Batman now shows up in crowds in front of everybody talking to Commissioner Gordon. That whole film did not know if it wanted to be 66 Batman or Burton's, the next in line for Returns. And it tried to thread the needle and do a bit of both, and it fails in both. Jim Carrey's initial Riddler, I actually don't mind, but as his Riddler goes along, really, and then why Tommy Lee Jones is even in there, what they do with Two-Face, trying to make him like the Joker. They just didn't know what to do with this property. Burton doesn't, goes away. He had a vision. They're like, well, let's try this.
Mm.
And yeah, listen to the episode. We go on a long rant with it. And then, but then they ask him, but it made some bank. It made some bank, and it's still the franchise, and they wanted to try to milk that cow for all it's worth. So then we get Batman and Robin, which has more stars. I always call it the opening of the egos for Batman and Robin, because the
Yeah.
names of the people come flying in on huge font, and like
Mm.
usually you get 1 or 2 stars and then the title, and then they give, the other stars like text, but not big. But not in Batman and Robin. Batman and Robin, the whole 6 stars get huge titles for the Batman and Robin, you know, title sequence. And you get that bomb.
And then you get. I was literally gonna pull up the guy's name, the composer of the score,
Did,
because the new theme for Batman sucks. And like it,
oh, that was Goldenthal that I think did that, right? It was that Elliot
yeah,
Goldenthal,
it was. I think you are correct.
because I know he did
Music by
Forever.
Elliot
Yeah,
Goldenthal. Yeah.
yeah, and you.
Bum bum bum
Oh, oh.
unforgettable, forgettable, and annoying.
You go from Danny Elfman's score in both films, regardless of how you feel Returns, his score in Returns is
That is
fantastic as
pure
well.
Danny Elfman. That score.
That is
That is
so
so different from Batman's score too.
it
Cause
is
like where
so Danny.
Batman's like kind of it's still kind of superhero-ish. I remember when they were doing
Mhm,
the score meeting with one of the producers. The
mhm.
producer's kind of bored throughout the meeting, and
Yeah,
then Burton's like whispering to Elfman, play the march, play the march, play the
yeah,
march, play the march. So he finally plays the march, which is
yeah.
which inspires Shirley Walker's score from
Hmm.
the Batman animated
Animated
series that
series, yeah.
got translated to Batman Mask of the Phantasm, which, although we're talking live action Batman films, that's a very overlooked film that at the time Roger Ebert said was the best Batman film until Batman Begins came out.
It was solid. It's a great film, not
Hmm.
just animated film. It's just a great film. It's
Exactly.
that it it's funny. Mask of the Phantasm does what Forever and Batman and Robin failed to do. They still were able to do a bit of a darker story, but they were able to make it still a comic book story to where you could market it towards kids. It didn't treat kids dumb, but at the same
Hmm.
time, it didn't go over campy. Mask of the Phantasm, and that's why it is one of the best Batman films, in my opinion, as well, out, because it was able to actually tread that fine line that they couldn't do in the next two animated live action films, which was give you a bit of that camp, give you a solid, mature, a decent story that isn't just, insulting or placating to kids, yet kept it light enough to where kids could still watch it and you wouldn't have parents walking out of the theater like you did with Batman Returns. That's what makes Phantasm so wonderful. There's adult themes in there, but they presented, and that was the way the whole show was. That animated series for me is still probably the best comic cartoon series for myself that
Mm.
I've watched, because the way they did those stories in that were just like that. They didn't make them dumb enough or play down enough to the kids. They made them mature stories, but yet they didn't make them so mature that it wasn't it was inappropriate either.
Mm.
And then you get Forever, and then you get Batman and Robin, which why I changed my opinion on Batman and Robin is because if you watch from 66 to Batman and Robin, it comes full circle. Batman and Robin is pretty much a modern 1966 Batman film, is what it is.
Yeah, and Mask of the Phantasm does something that none of the other Batman films, including Batman,
Mhm.
'89 did, which is they made a movie about Batman, and that actually explored his character, explored his past, explored, his parents getting shot, which is
Well,
kind of
yeah.
a cliche now. Uh,
Relationships, though, his.
Relationship status and like his basically his duality with the Joker and all of that's in there.
Yeah.
And it was kind of really ahead of its time, and Roger saw that, and it's a movie that really stands the test of time.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if it's on Blu-ray or not. I would
Yeah,
love.
I think I think it got a Blu-ray
Yeah.
release. I'm not 100%, but it's on digital. It's on Disney Plus. I think that's a high def render of it, a cleanup of it. But Yeah, it's a gorgeous, it's wonderful Batman film. I like.
It is. It's really, and it's funny when people talking about how there are movies that are oh, it's an animated film, it's a live action film. It's like, well, who cares if it's animated? You know how much, like, I could never do an animated film. I'd probably make two drawings and I'd be like, ah, fuck this, and I just like go home. Though
Well, and
the artistry involved in that, I mean, they even established the look. I of course inspired a little bit from the '89 film, but really from the comic books, it's like literally page for page what the comics looked like. I don't know.
it doesn't they made it designed similar to what Burton was going for in 89 Batman, and I think he accomplished it for live action, but definitely the animated series, its whole identity was like the comics, to where it had the 50s style as far as like the buildings and the cars and such, when Batman first started or what, it had that style, but at the same time it had also a modern feel to it. They managed to do this amalgamation to where Batman the animated series is in its own world
Mm-hmm.
altogether. It's not meant to be in the real world, but it's not too comic booky. It was fitting for Batman, and yeah, and it gave Mark Hamill new life in
Yeah,
his career, because he had the live action Guyver films. I think that he did before
he did
those.
make. He did. What's that guy? Is that make?
Guyver, the
Yeah.
animated series, the Guyver, or Guyver, I forgot what it was called exactly, but I think it was just Guyver. But he did two live action direct to video versions of that
Joker of the Joker.
show. No, not as
No.
Joker, just
Uh,
Mark Hamill just did it as a character from the anime Guyver.
okay. See,
Sorry, yeah.
that's beyond my knowledge. I don't know what guy.
Yo, yeah, Guyver was an anime series that they did a bad live action film on, and Mark Hamill was in it.
Yeah.
So he does the voice to the Joker, which surprised everybody, because you didn't know. I remember I was floored when I watched the first episode, the Joker. I'm like, I'm loving this Joker. I'm like, and then the credits came up afterwards and it said Mark Hamill as the Joker. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And he played it in Mask of the Phantasm so well. And him and Kevin Conroy, which, yeah, he's voice acting, but a lot of people consider Kevin's actually Batman the best Batman to be portrayed on video or movies.
Well,
Be,
I never knew it was Mark Hamill for most of my childhood until I
Mhm.
became an adult. And I'm like, oh, that's where Mark Hamill was. I thought he like disappeared. I'm like, oh, I feel so bad. I'm like, oh no, he's an amazing voice actor. Oh my god, I had no idea. And I was just thinking, you know what would be amazing? They'll never do this. But I'm sick of seeing so many Jokers now because they're all
Mhm.
incredible. You got Romero, Nicholson to Ledger to
Yeah.
Joaquin Phoenix. If the if Matt Reeves wants to bring the Joker back, fuck it, make it Mark Hamill, make him
Make it
old,
Mark Hamill, dude. Oh,
like make him an older Joker. Like when they're in their older years. Like I don't see
good.
why not. You know.
I don't see why not either. He was fantastic in the Joker. And it's funny because that helped, I think, because he ended up showing up as the trickster in the 90s Flash TV show. That he ended up playing I think it was the trickster in that. And it was like, holy crap, that's Mark Hamill. He started showing up a lot more. But his voice as the Joker was phenomenal, and it fits so well with the series. And who knew he could do that? No one ever quite expected that from him. And yeah, it's funny how much the animated series got right and the next two live action films that Schumacher did got wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And and then DC kind of started that trend for a lot of their properties to even this day. I will, and no offense, I don't hate Marvel by any means, even though I call myself the DC show. I love Marvel stuff. But when it comes to their animated movies, DC has a lot better library of animated films than
Hmm.
Marvel has.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
what they were doing right in animated, they didn't get right in those Schumacher films.
No, they did it because Schumacher didn't take the material seriously.
No,
He came on set on a big megaphone and said, "Okay, remember everybody, we're doing a comic book," which is now the precipice for how not to direct a because look, Batman Forever, we got a whole episode about that, but basically it tried to go over Batman's past and how he became
yeah.
Batman barely, and then it just was a bunch of, actors being goofy. I think to the point where Tommy Lee Jones approached Jim Carrey in a restaurant that year. I don't know if you ever heard this story,
Mhm.
where he puts his arm around Jim Carrey and he says, "I hate you. I cannot fathom your buffoonery." You know,
Yeah.
which I thought, well, what do you mean you can't fathom his buffoonery? You acted like a buffoon in that movie
Oh my
yourself.
God.
But now I go back and I go, oh, maybe it was because he had to match Carrie's
Hmm.
level of energy that he felt like this was bringing down the character. But at the same time, the way they even designed Two Face in it, his burnt side is like purple.
Purple.
It looks like you could. It looks like candy. It looks like you could eat it. It looks like it would taste good, but I don't know. Maybe I'm a cannibal. Who knows? Uh, but you, you see that you're going, okay. You have a dark villain like Two Face who has an enormously fascinating history to Bruce Wayne and Batman
Hmm.
that they completely fail to explore. He's just a laughing idiot. And then you have Jim Carrey, who's,
Jim
yeah,
Carrey.
you know what? I'm
He's
sorry, man. He's right. Tommy Lee Jones is right. He was being a buffoon. I mean, Tommy Lee Jones is an asshole, but he's right.
well, Carrey was embodying every single character he had played up into
Yeah,
that
it was just
point.
Ace Ventura, and that's
Yeah.
what they wanted. That's what they got.
Well, yeah.
And with Batman and Robin, I never disliked that one because I'm right there with you. I never disliked that one as much as I disliked Batman Forever because
Hmm.
Batman and Robin knew it was dumb as shit. They hired fucking Arnold Schwarzenegger. What more proof do you need?
For Dr. Freeze, who
For
everybody
Dr.
was,
Freeze, a man who's very well spoken and intelligent, is like, blah, blah, Dr. Freeze, blah. And they get Bane, who's a WWE wrestler, just going, burn.
they so I think that is why I think that's why I had so much hatred for the longest time for Batman and Robin, was their choice of, and don't get me wrong, I like Joel Schumacher's work. The original horror film that he did, it's just escaping me right. Flatliners.
8
I
millimeter?
love
Oh,
No, I love Flatliners. I love Flatliners. One of my I so
Hmm.
awesome. I do
Yeah,
enjoy that.
Schumacher's a talented guy. And he's great. And he can do dark, which is what really confuses me. It's like, dude, dark. Like what?
Yeah.
But
But
I
then
I don't know if it was his fault. I think it was the studio,
no,
and he just did what they asked him to do.
he was a total pawn for the studio. The studio, after what Burton did, the studio was so scared of letting anybody do anything that I think, if I remember, read somewhere, they had him constantly under watch and checking things and telling him what to do. And Batman and
Mm.
Robin, it was totally written and produced by people who had obviously not really read the comics, because one, I don't mind Schwarzenegger. Dr. Freeze is not that big of a guy. You know,
No, he's not. He's a
we're
thin. He looks like me
he's a thin
without the hair.
professor guy. He's a
Yeah.
thin professor guy. He's an egghead type of guy. So they cast Schwarzenegger and he's in this big suit, and you're just like, what the hell? Uma Thurman works as Poison Ivy. I liked her character. I do. I did. She
Yeah.
was one of the better points of that film. It's
Yeah.
just the way they wrote her,
Hmm.
was just like, but if you watch them all back to back, I don't have as much hatred, because yeah, I did for the longest time, mostly because what they did to Bane. They took Bane, and this is how I know whoever created this did not read the comics, because
Hmm.
around the same time, either before or after, they had issue Batman 500, where Bane cracks Batman's back. Bane is a guy into Venom. He gets boosted super strength from this drug, and he was also very intelligent and went toe to toe intellectually with Batman, and he broke his back. And I remember reading that issue going, no, even though I knew it was coming, I still was like, no. So then they turn him into this mindless zombie of a guy who is like, yeah, big. He's just the foot soldier for Poison Ivy. He doesn't get much dialogue. He's nowhere near the equivalent of Batman, even George Clooney's Batman. He's just not that. And you're just like, what the fuck did you do to this
Yeah.
villain?
Yeah, they took every single villain and made them sort of like the antithesis of that. I mean, the most they got was Poison Ivy was sexy because
Yeah,
this is we have to remember this is the 90s. This is when women were
yeah.
still sort of viewed as sexual figures solely in a way. You
Well,
know.
well, Poison Ivy was always a sexually,
Oh no,
a
she
bit
was
of a,
always sexually driven, but like that was the only thing they
but
had
that
for
was
her
the
in that
only reason.
movie.
Yeah, but her character was a cliche of every other female character up until that point. She was not written. She was written better than you might expect, but she was still, yeah. The way they handled her was amateurish
Yeah,
for sure.
and yeah, the movie is more like it's fun to watch, like, but as sort of a goof. But it, it was so bad that even Joel Schumacher had to apologize for
Later
making it,
year,
which
yeah.
I was like, I don't know if he had to do that. I don't
Mm-mm.
think it was his fault entirely. I mean, it was a lot of it was his fault, but I don't know. Did they make him a sacrificial lamb for that or not? Is what I wonder. You know?
I feel they might have, especially for the fourth one. I think by the fourth one, it just feels like, okay, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
I just, what, fine, okay. Want you want black light roller skaters. Okay, fine. He's
Yeah.
used black light before. He used it in Flatliners, but a little more subtly. But he did use black light. But so much neon, so much, and the Batmobile goes from one of the most iconic vehicles you could see in modern cinema at that time in the 80s and 90s to this organic glowing ribbed thing. They get Alicia Silverstone in here as Batgirl, but they don't really establish her character that much. you
They should call her
know
Bird Girl for how she feeds her daughter.
they have her, which I like her as an actress, but just for this role, it was like it felt like there was very little direction from the actual director, and it felt like the studio producers were just in his ear going, okay, do this now. It's like, okay, we're doing this now. And that was the issue I had with that, is especially the production design. It was so jarring from what we got from the first two films that it was just like, by that fourth one, you're just like, okay, whatever. I'm watching it, but it's definitely something that it felt just slapped together like, well, we got to do this. And it turns a lot of the fans off. I really, it's just it's like
But it turned him off because it was B Cam. It regressed.
mhm.
You know, I feel like Batman and Robin is a bit like if you look at it's kind of like an analogy for a drug addict. You know, the Batman was when the drug addict got off the drugs, he was doing better. He was giving you some quality films. Like maybe he wasn't always on top, but he knew what he was doing. But then Batman Forever comes out and he starts swaying a little bit. You know, he starts smoking a little. He starts doing other stuff. And then Batman and Robin is when he completely
Just fell off
goes
the
back.
wagon.
Yeah, he falls off the wagon and he just goes full Andy Warhol 1960s Batman. And I think from there, that's when the studio said, oh shit, what are we gonna do? Because did it make money, Batman and Robin,
It
or
it
did it?
did it
Because
still made no, it still made money, but I think it made above its budget, but it still just was not. It was
Mm. Just
in
barely made
like,
over it.
yeah, it wasn't quite a 10-year span, but in that span of like 8 years that it, from first Batman to it just failed. It had the wind fell out of the sails, and that's where studios were stumbling again, not knowing what to do with these properties. They started out stronger, like, hey, comic book film, these comic books of Blade and, like I said, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and all these, but they didn't know how to do the sequel.
No, they did it, and because this was a time when we sequels were still known for not being as good as the original.
They were still new.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one thing that I picked up from an interview I saw with Kevin Smith when he interviewed Bruce Willis. This was
Mm-hmm.
around the time of the Live Free or Die Hard, I think it was, or Die Harder. The fourth one. Um, he was interviewing him, and Bruce Willis said, well, it was interesting because a lot of people talk about how Die Hard 2 was weak compared to Die Hard. And he's like, very few filmmakers and studios knew how to handle sequels in the 80s and early 90s because no one had really done like a direct sequel seriously before that was big budget. I mean, yes, you had, you know, Steven Spielberg, but he was the exception. That's why those films were so iconic, was because he could make a sequel, but for everybody else, you're like, studios didn't know how to handle it. They didn't quite know how to. They had this property, great. Well, we did everything in the first movie. What are we gonna do now? You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
and that is definitely evident in the 90s with the comic book properties, and that's why they turned the way they did, not just Batman with Batman and Robin, but even Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The third one was okay, but it was just weird. They're going back in
Mm-hmm.
time. Blade series did okay, but the sequels were not nearly as kick ass. Well, maybe Blade
Well,
2.
Blade 2 was Guillermo del
Okay, Blade
Toro.
2.
It didn't
Blade 2
have the
was
substance that the first one did. I did like how they
right.
connected it to his mother and his
Mm-hmm.
past, and there's sort of a driving motivation. And even the main villain is it's just Steven
Yeah.
Dorff being a douchebag. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I
Like he
should
was
say that.
sort of having an e-cig in the
Yeah,
in the thing.
yeah, but I mean, Blade. Okay, Blade was kind of the exception. The sequels were near the level of the first one, at least as far as
Not the
impact, but
third one. The third one
not
shit.
the third one. No,
Yeah.
but again, they kind of petered because they weren't quite sure where to go from here because they hadn't really handled too many sequels before, especially past a second film. My
Mm,
God,
yeah.
it's like,
Because Batman Forever made a lot of money, and McDonald's particularly, like the little like cups that they sold that had like the graphic
oh yeah, the
design and all
glasses. I
that.
had the
Yeah,
glasses. I had the pressed glasses were really cool. I
they're
had
beautiful
those.
glass. They're actually like I think they were like full glass, like
Yeah.
these Galway Bay glasses that you can get. Yeah, but like they had like the characters on them and all that, and
Well, they were
they
textured. They were like 3D too. They had like they were
mm,
pop out too. They were, the scene wasn't just flat on a glass like a lot of your collector glasses were early with a picture. They actually were textured. The handle was textured. The scene popped out. It was like shaped glass cups. I used to have a bunch of them.
yeah, I think
Um,
those movies like 3 and 4 within the. I mean, I guess you can call them 3 and 4. They're not really. I just say it because Michael Goff was still Alfred,
yeah,
and
yeah.
he
You could
still had.
he
Yeah,
still connected them all. So you could say they were all in the same, yeah.
yeah. Which
Um,
I still, in terms of like, I don't know, is he my? He's not my favorite Alfred, but he's also my favorite Alfred in a way. Like,
he was a wonderful Alfred. I
yeah,
loved his Alfred.
I love Michael Goff. He. Anyways, those movies were made to be toyetic. You know,
Hmm.
they were made to sell the merchandise solely on that. Where Batman '89, yeah, the toys were there, but they didn't they didn't know the potential for the market with that, which I don't know why they didn't after Star Wars and that
Yeah,
whole debacle with, you had to wait and past December to get your
yeah,
toy, and you have to get the box to see what kind of toy you were going to get with the whole Star Wars thing. But once they learned after Batman, how toyetic it was, and then how Batman Forever was such a filmmaker's vision that the toyeticness, they had to change the property and give Catwoman her own little car with a
Car.
floating tail.
Well, they definitely took away the seams too. When most of the Catwoman outfits that you saw in the toys were more classic Catwoman or from the comic outfit that she had. They not many were the latex skin suit that, that you saw in the movie.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that too. Yeah. I mean, because that suit must have sucked to wear.
It had
I
to
feel. I
suck.
mean, God bless Michelle Pfeiffer. I mean, that thing looked like it was just squeezing every crevice of her body, and I don't mean that in a sexual way.
No,
I
it
just
didn't
mean like
breathe.
if I was a guy and I had to have that on me, with like I don't have a beer gut anymore. I have a fupa from all the weight I lost. But like if I had that squeezing against it, that would
That thing did not breathe either. You could tell that thing did not.
I don't think she could breathe in it in
Yeah,
certain
she.
points. You know
Yeah,
that one take when she's doing the whip and she knocks the
yeah.
head off the thing. She did that in the first take.
I know.
Yeah, dude,
The
she
the
was
whip
going.
master was impressed by her talent that she pulled that off in the first take. It was like,
I wonder if she can still do that. I'm gonna
I,
I'm gonna see if she has Twitter and see if she can still do it.
tweet. Can you still do the whip trick?
Yeah, can you still do it? Yeah, I bet you
Let's
can.
see. Block Mike Crowley.
No, I don't mean it in that way. Dude, I bet she'd be like, I'm gonna prove that I can.
Probably.
I'll be
Yeah. No.
like, I bet at your
Yeah.
age you can't. Do
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. And Michelle Pfeiffer go, okay, yeah, and she
Like, all
does
right,
it.
motherfucker, you're on.
She totally would.
Yeah. But then after Batman and Robin, and that doesn't work out, and Joel Schumacher is pretty much an acronym for bad Batman movies, which I mean, I feel bad for him in that respect. Uh, Batman Begins comes out. Christopher Nolan, and no one believes me when I tell them this, but I swear to God, if there is one, that this is true. Before Batman Begins came out, I was telling everyone if they were to make a Batman movie, I want it to be made by Christopher Nolan, the guy who made Memento, and then I remember on
Mhm.
the Memento DVD, they had a little trailer for Following. And then I saw Following, and I went, whoa, who is this
Mhm.
guy? And then I realized he did Insomnia. And I just thought this guy would be perfect. He's subtle,
Mhm.
atmospheric, character driven. The cinematography doesn't call attention to itself. Nothing really does. Like, this would be the perfect guy. And I said, he should direct it. And American Psycho himself, Christian Bale, should be
Mhm.
Batman. Because the thing that made Michael Keaton's Batman work was that he was an unpredictable fucking nut.
Yeah,
Like
he was. Yeah,
he will smile in your face and punch you over a bridge while you have
yeah.
explosives strapped to you. And I thought if these two could get together and make a Batman movie, that'd be incredible. And I want it to be about how Batman becomes Batman because I've never seen his origin
Yeah.
story. I didn't know IMDb existed at the time. I went to this website called movies.com.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Oh god, yeah, we are old. Um,
Yes.
I go on movies.com. It says Batman Begins, director Christopher Nolan, star Christian Bale. I went, what? I could have fucking produced this. The movie comes out, and we finally get a live action movie about Batman. And Roger Ebert said in his review, "This is the Batman movie I've been hoping for, and I've been waiting for. Aside from Mask of the
Mhm.
Phantasm words,
Yeah.
that I finally got." And of the Dark Knight trilogy, this might be my favorite one because it is about the Caped Crusader himself,
Mhm.
and it's not getting distracted with all the villains and all that. And this was when Christian Bale didn't go too far in his Batman voice. Like if you look at Batman Begins Batman compared to Dark Knight and Dark Knight
Oh yeah.
Rises, he sounds a little more like this.
Yeah.
And the sequels, he sounds like this. and that's when it didn't work. But
Yeah.
this was a fascinating film where, if you remember seeing Batman Begins, the first hour, maybe even more, hour 10 minutes, there's no Batman.
Hmm.
It's just Bruce Wayne. He's training with the League of Shadows. The editing is slick.
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan, despite how choppy the action is, the editing is so fucking smooth that I
Hmm.
love it. And he is a structural master. I mean, we know that because of Memento. He told an entire movie in
Backwards. Yeah.
reverse order. Yeah, backwards. Yeah. And when we see Batman Begins, this is a movie about why Batman puts on the cape and the cowl, which is
Mm.
opposite to what Tim Burton won. Tim Burton's
Right.
like, I like the mystery of the character. I don't want to know, I don't want him monologuing and all that. But the thing was, I respect Tim Burton, but I disagree with him. We
Mm.
needed that in a way because we needed to know what drives Batman. He's not just some psychopath who kills people. And
Yep.
in this one, Batman makes a point of not killing people. Although at the end of the day, he tells Ra's al Ghul, "Hey, you're in this crashing train. I'm not going to save you. That doesn't count as killing. Bye." Like, no, that counts as killing you, dumbass.
Yeah.
You're still falling inside of an underground tunnel and you're going to explode. He doesn't have a cape to fly away. But that was a movie that defined Batman, and that is probably my favorite Batman movie. And yeah, the action's choppy and all that, but I didn't care because that movie proved you can have subpar action, but if your story works and your audience cares about the character and the vision is there, that's what matters. Because Batman looks a little bit like Blade Runner because that was the influence for it, the neon lighting with the
Hmm.
rain and all that. And I remember seeing that in the theater, and I just thought, I remember as I was watching it, when he's in the prison and they're going back to his past, I'm going, I never thought I'd get this film. This is exactly what I always picked. It was the same feeling I got last year when I saw Spider-Man: No Way Home. Like, oh my god, this
Oh,
is a
sure.
movie I
Yeah.
pictured in my head and is happening. And that was a wonderful, beautiful moment, and just the subtle cinematography. The DP he used to have, I can't remember his name because I'm an idiot.
Hmm.
He is no longer Batman. It's like Hoyton von Humar or whatever is
Yeah.
like his
Yeah.
new uh, DP, which always uses like this blue color tone, which just
Hmm.
annoys me. Like he's clearly just exploiting Christopher Nolan's color blindness, which he actually has. Wally
Yeah.
Feister's cinematography,
Mm.
I did not just go on IMDb, was muted
Mm.
and beautiful and really took off in the sequels. But what were your thoughts when you saw Begins?
Well, considering how much of a bad taste Schumacher, because again, I was a teenager, I was more emotional about films at the time. Uh, Schumacher's films had left a bad taste in my mouth. We hadn't got anything for like 10 years. We were living, off of comics and animated films and that. So this came out, and what I liked it because one, it still gave respect to like the 89 Batman.
Yes. Yeah.
He didn't try to erase it. He was doing his own thing, which I was kind of concerned about, considering
Mm-hmm.
how, later on you learn of how the studios felt about the original 89 Batman. So you could tell. And the big thing that stood out for me, and what I appreciated about it and what I did enjoy about it, was the fact that I liked the approach of them trying to see what would Batman be like in a real world
Mm-hmm.
versus comic book world at
Mm.
that time. And
Very
that's what it
gritty,
was,
very
because
grounded. Yeah.
it was gritty, it was definitely grounded. I didn't quite like his voice. I've never,
Yeah.
out of any of the movies, I didn't quite like his voice. I liked the look of the Batman. Um and I liked the costume, and I even liked the how they modified the costumes later on. And I enjoyed Batman Begins quite a bit, because it was an improvement, at least over the Schumacher ones. The production design, though, I didn't quite care for some of the choices they made
Yeah,
with it.
Gotham looks like a set, although it's supposed to be like a city in Begins, which
Right.
always kind of threw me off. Like, because there are like moments where like you see these sprawling shots of Chicago, and then they're like somewhere that clearly looks like a set. Like
Yeah.
especially the third act when
Oh
they
yeah.
have the humidifier or whatever the hell it's called, like the thing that releases fear toxin on everyone.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing is I liked the exploration of his origin of where he got his training. That I dug. The fact that they dug
Yeah,
deep and they bring Ra's al Ghul and the League of Shadows, which you were like, who? If you hadn't read comics at all, you didn't know who so they dug deep there. They use Scarecrow, who's an interesting choice for the main baddie, because again, they picked someone who, if you weren't familiar with the comics, if people were just used to the toys and the merchandise, you're like, scare who?
well,
You
I
know,
knew
the,
him from the animated series and all that. Yeah,
or the animated series. I mean, you knew it from animated series, but still, your general public
yeah.
still weren't quite as familiar with some of the villains. And so I thought that was an interesting choice. They were dealing with Arkham, which I like because I
Mm,
always love the idea of Arkham. Um, it was some of the choices with Batman I didn't quite care for, namely the
yeah.
vehicle.
The
And
Tumbler. Yeah,
the tumbler, and because it's Batman, right? He needs to get away quick, he needs to be slick, maybe not necessarily stand out as much. So what vehicle does he pick but this huge turtle of a vehicle that there is no way, even though they play at it, they
yeah.
try to sell it, there's no way a vehicle like that's really going to be stealthy to
No, that thing, that
anyone.
engine is gonna be loud as fuck on the streets. I remember see. All right, so some of my friends, I actually tried to get a crew job on
Mhm.
Batman Begins. I almost got one on The Dark Knight, but Begins, unfortunately, I ended up having to settle for fucking Transformers. But like, I remember like seeing some of those videos
Yeah,
of the tumbler going down the street. That engine is like,
I know,
you're like,
right?
whoa, this dude is not. But I kind of liked the idea of the tumbler. I like that this is a vehicle for a tortured soul, and it looks like it's slapped together. And it's like, let's face it, the Batmobile is a tank, so why not just get a freaking tank?
Yeah,
So they
that's
do
true.
that. He pancakes cop cars.
Yeah.
He jumps. I love the chase sequence in that movie. Like
Oh
that
yeah.
movie's action sucks except for the tumblers. That scene is fucking awesome. When he's jumping over rooftops on the Batmobile. Oh, it's a visual treat.
It is a visual treat, but at the same time, you're thinking to yourself, wow, Gotham's got to just be pissed at Batman.
Look at all the property damage.
Look at all the property damage you
Well,
got
even
from this.
Alfred points it out. That's what I here's how you could tell that you had your Christopher Nolan who didn't let Hollywood and ego get to his head, where Alfred is telling Bruce, "Look at the news. What do you call that shit? What the fuck is wrong with you?"
What's wrong with you? Yeah.
Yeah. And then in that and The Dark Knight Rises, Bruce Wayne just shows up from whatever stand. He's like, "Hey, what's up, guys?" Like, "What the fuck? Where'd you come from? How'd you get here?" And I loved how they made the tumbler sort of something that's more believable and tangible for Batman. And although not I like that Batman 1989 Batmobile is just like one of the I am legitimately like, I'm not even saying this as a metaphor. I am fucking pissed off that Jeff Dunham, the racist, unfunny comic who plays with puppets, owns that car. That is
He owns
bullshit.
the actual car.
He owns
Oh,
it.
fuck. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, man. But I mean, because that car was iconic. So for me, with loving the car, the tumbler took a while to get used to. I was okay with it because of the setting. At the same time, I'm like, yeah, okay. So when I saw Begins, though, I came out fairly satisfied. At least I'm like, well, it wasn't it wasn't the Schumacher show, and
Okay.
they did a lot of cool things in it. I've never been a Nolan worshiper. I've
Okay.
appreciated his
Yeah.
work quite a bit. I understand, where people, I don't fault anyone for whatever they like. You like what you like. That's fine and fanatical. For me, I like his earlier work more so than his later work.
Mm.
I liked his work on Batman, though. I liked it because it was respectful. He was trying to put Batman in the real world settings versus your sets. And, he was abandoning a bit of the comic book camp. And it really felt more like the animated series quite a bit. Batman Begins did
Yeah.
than it did, a sequel or whatever to Schumacher's stuff. So that's what I liked about it, was the fact that it had a spirit of the animated series for sure. And you could tell he made, I don't know, I haven't read interviews or anything, but it almost felt like he was a bit influenced by that, at least by the approach of the story. So Batman Begins definitely has a really solid story and characters
Mm.
and that are more grounded. And so it was fun to see that with the Batman characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were the things that particularly irked you most with it? I'm not going to be like, "Ooh, you don't like it,"
No,
you know.
no, it
Like everyone likes what they like, and I'm never going to give someone shit for liking someone different than me, like,
and
ever.
it's not like I
Unless
hated
it's a
it
Michael
by
Bay film. No, I'm just kidding.
well,
Even that Bad Boys is actually pretty fun.
I was gonna
And
say there's some fun films with him.
yeah,
No, I didn't hate it. I wasn't like, oh my god,
yeah.
but I liked it because it looked like they were taking it in a different direction,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what stuck with me. What I didn't quite like, again, I mentioned mostly were some of the aesthetic things with Batman, namely the
Mm.
Tumblr was a little tough to get around. The end sequence with the gas and the train felt a little bit like we
Yeah.
were we were retreading. You had done a lot of great
Mm-hmm.
original stuff, and then you get to the train part and releasing the gas, and I'm like, okay, I've kind of seen this before. you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
that was the problem I had with it too. You make a really good point, which is like when I saw the movie, like it didn't bother me as much, but even it was kind of like in the back of my head, and I'm just like saying, "Shut up, conscious! I'm trying to enjoy it," you know. But like, I remember watching it and going, "Okay, now this is just turning into like a regular comic book movie." Where it's
Mhm.
like, okay, the bad guy is gonna do the bad guy thing, and the good guy has to stop him. And maybe that was a studio request. I think that was we were mentioning Blade
Yeah.
earlier, and
Mhm.
how I said that Blade 3 sucked.
Mm.
Well, the writer of Blade 3 is David Goyer, who did, I would say, the first draft of Batman Begins. And then
Yes.
Christopher Nolan saw it and he went, "Oh, this is rubbish." And then just took off certain parts and fixed it up, you know? Maybe
Yeah.
with his brother Jonathan as a ghostwriter. Who knows?
Who
Uh,
knows? Maybe.
yeah. But they got to that third sequence and they cut to that one older guy. No
Mhm.
offense, I'll be that age before I know it if I survive global warming. Where he is saying, "If this train gets here at a certain time, it's gonna blow," and I'm
Yeah.
giving more exposition. Like, what the fuck are they doing? Like, but
Yeah.
I mean, outside of that, I didn't mind it. I kind of liked how the fear toxin tied not so subtly to the character, where it's like,
Yeah.
I go off of fear. Here's a fear toxin. This is why fear wins the
Mhm.
night. Blah blah blah. With all that said, this felt like the most complete Batman movie. This felt like this is a movie that understood his character,
Mhm.
understood a lot of the things from the comics that even I didn't know, like Carmine Falcone and all
Right.
those guys, you know, like, and a lot of that, the Matt Reeves, the Batman, which what a big dick move putting the in front of Batman. Uh, I can see a lot of that Nolan cinematography, Wally
Mhm.
Feister cinematography slash aesthetic behind it, where it's very grounded because we can't go back to Schumacher, right?
No, well,
And
no. Well, you got to look at it, the times change though too. The 90s were a weird time for films in general because it was a weird time in real life. I mean, there was a lot of things to be positive about if it sounds weird. I mean, you also had the negative though. You still, had Desert Storm and that, but there was still it was a really interesting time And you've got to look at Batman Begins as happening post 9/11,
Mm.
and I've always, and I haven't done a study, but I've always been I always wanted to try to do like a study of horror films as well as how they changed after 9/11, how things changed, because cinema in general changed. I remember after 9/11, the big controversy they had with Spider-Man, where he had the Twin Towers and he had his web between it, and that teaser disappeared. And like you didn't see that one anymore. uh and so there were some other choices. So the world and everything was just a little bit different. Kids had grown up by now with that tragedy. Some of the young kids, I mean, you witnessed that. So how do you do a grounded, darker film, but not too dark and whatnot? So Batman Begins, I liked where they went with it overall. I liked his approach. I liked his work. And the fact I think that it made it more acceptable to me was that it was fact grounded so much in reality that I was like, okay, where do you go from here? I'm
Yeah.
interested. It piqued my interest again in live action and made me hopeful for the second one,
Yeah.
because you knew there was going to be a second one. I mean, when you're watching it, you're going, they're going to make another.
Well, yeah, but they had the final shot where
Yeah.
there's the Joker card,
Mm-hmm.
and he says to him, "Oh, could
Yeah.
you look into this?" And he goes, "Yeah, I will." I mean, he doesn't say that.
Well, that's the thing. I like their pick for Commissioner Gordon too. I like the casting they did for Batman Begins as well. I liked how they approached a lot of their stuff. Would have liked to see, almost wish they would have brought Billy D. Williams back for Harvey Dent, but you know, would have liked to see maybe a slightly different casting choice there. But um overall, yeah, it was like Batman Begins shows up and you're like, oh, I have hope again. I have some hope in the live action film. And yeah, so overall I didn't hate it. For me, the 89 Batman for me is that most influential movie, so nothing's going to replace that, nor that am I expecting it to. But it was close. It was like, oh, I dig this. I'm in.
Mm.
They brought me back into the feeling confident again, going, all right. you
Now,
know
when they go to the Dark Knight, uh, I'm in the minority here. That might be my least favorite of the
Really.
of the Nolan
Mm-hmm.
trilogy. Um, that doesn't mean I dislike it. As a matter of fact, I think it's fantastic. But I remember seeing it, and before I saw it, if I rewind a bit, I felt disappointed because I uh, was going, oh boy, are they not going to focus on Batman? Is this going to be
Mm-hmm.
about everyone else? And yeah, it was. It was literally like about everyone but him. But they tie it to him in the end,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was pretty clever.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it has its memorable moments. The bank robbery, which was the IMAX preview at the time. I remember that was a huge deal because Christopher Nolan is huge on celluloid, wanted it to be on IMAX, and
Mm-hmm.
that was a scene ripped straight from Heat that really made me love certain elements of that movie. I liked how you look at Batman Begins, that's a Batman film. You look at The Dark Knight, that's a crime film.
Mm-hmm.
And they're almost not comparable, much like how Batman and Batman Returns is, right? Although you have the same actors returning, you almost have a completely different vision.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the design of Gotham and Batman Begins, you have some shots of Chicago, but then you get the weird looking out of place set shots.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at The Dark Knight, and it's just every single square inch of Chicago
Yeah.
filmed.
Yeah.
And it looks like a real city because it is a
Mm-hmm.
real city, and I loved that aesthetic in it. I loved how this is like, oh, this is a crime film. Maybe this is a movie I don't quite understand, and I have to see
Mm-hmm.
again. And in a way, it was because I think about it, I go, structurally, this movie, it's like Christopher Nolan knows exactly what the fuck he was doing because everyone, I think one common criticism of The Dark Knight is they say, oh, they could have cut the last 30 minutes. I'm like, why would you cut the last 30
Yeah.
minutes? That's the deepest part of the film. That is what I wanted with Two-Face in Batman Forever. That is his entire arc where he turns into a villain and it leads to his downfall. I don't think I'm spoiling the movie at this point. It's
Hmm.
considered older now. Oh my god, I can't believe that's considered older. Where Two Face meets his demise in the first film, but that's because he wasn't really meant to become a bad guy. He's meant to be a tragic figure, and
Right.
Christopher Nolan said himself, he's the heart of the story. And in that, I respect the hell out of it. I don't
Hmm.
really compare it to Batman Begins and The Dark Knight Rises because those movies are very Batman centric,
Hmm.
and this one isn't. This is a collaborative piece. This is an ensemble piece, and as an ensemble piece, I feel like every actor worked perfectly. Maggie Gyllenhaal was a huge upgrade from Katie Holmes. I remember when they announced that everyone in the cast is returning except for one person, with that clickbaity bullshit
Yeah.
article. I'm like, who? And I click, it's like Katie Holmes. I'm like, who gives a shit about Katie Holmes? Yeah, if you told me like Morgan Freeman or Michael Keaton or any of those guys left, I would have been shocked.
Yeah.
But they didn't. Which, by the way, I would say Michael Caine. Did I say Michael Keaton?
You
I meant
said
this.
Keaton. You meant Kane. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
ADD. That's me. Michael Caine might be my favorite Alfred
Mm.
because he will just straight up tell Batman to go fuck off, and he isn't just the guy
Hmm.
serving the drinks and
Yeah.
the entrees and all that. He actually helps Batman become Batman, right?
Hmm.
And then in The Dark Knight, he's the guy who keeps Batman from straight up quitting his job when the Joker completely outsmarts Batman. That's a concern I have with the new Reeves Batman film. Is like, are
Hmm.
they just making the Riddler the Joker? You know,
Yeah.
with like an overly intricate plan that is like perfectly executed. Which I have to say, for the purpose of that movie, yeah, it's not believable that someone would have that much shit pre thought out. But at the same time, you're like, wow, this Joker is amazing. Which, by the way, Heath Ledger's Joker, yes, deserved that Oscar, deserved that posthumous Oscar after um, the guy from Network who got it. He was the guy before that, the Mad as Hell
Hmm.
guy. He got it before Heath Ledger. And with Heath Ledger's Joker, it's like he's scary as shit. But then when he talks, particularly the intimidation scene or the interrogation
The
scene,
interrogate. Yeah.
words,
Hmm.
uh, you there's a little fucked up part of the large chunk of the audience's brain went, oh shit, he makes a good point.
He does.
When he
He
says when
does.
the chips are down, society will tear each
Hmm.
other apart. COVID happens. What does everyone do on day one? They rip each other apart for toilet paper.
Oh yeah.
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 And that's what I liked. It's like the villain's motivation isn't like, oh, I feel bad for him. It was more like, he's a piece of shit, but he's kind of right. And that was sort of the things about The Dark Knight that I really appreciated. It's a movie you go back and you can kind of peel little layers off of it and get a
Hmm.
little more and get a little more. And it's just one of those films that I've appreciated more. And I liked it when I saw it, but I like it even more the more I think about it and the more I talk about it and the more I see it. Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, what surprised me is, again, back to 89 being so influential. I'm like, oh, they're doing the Joker. Oh, they picked Heath Ledger. Okay, I like Batman Begins. We'll see what he does. And I was blown away by the Joker. And what I liked again is the fact that they're doing a villain that had been done before live action, on the screen, live action. But again, they weren't disrespecting anything that had come before it. And in fact, there's little hints of Nicholson's Joker in Ledger's Joker.
Mm-hmm.
Either the spirit of, or even some of the nuances that he does. It's completely his own. Don't get me wrong. And you're right, totally deserved. That year, that was the best performance out of any of the film. That film, his performance was just, it was like you did not see Heath Ledger. You forgot Heath Ledger was the Joker. You
Yeah.
see the Joker, this crazy, screwed up, guy who is into chaos, but he does have enough logic to where, like you said, you're like, he's kind of right. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, he's kind of, you know, he's smarter and more charismatic, a little jigsawish of sorts, almost, from Saw in a way, in some of his philosophy. But he really makes that film, and while it isn't quite as much a Batman film, it does still explore and open up the rawness of Batman. And that's what I like about it as well, is that this Joker really brings to light what Batman may have been trying to ignore about himself. And that he's only a heartbeat away from being a villain.
Mm.
And that's kind of the theme. That's that theme throughout that film, is the fact of, I mean, of course, the line, you either die or you live long enough to see yourself
Yeah.
become the
You die
villain.
a hero or live long
Yeah,
enough to see yourself become the villain.
and
Though
you
good
get
lines. They say exactly what the movie's saying, and you're like,
right.
that's cheesy. But then you're like, I remember that line years later. Shit, that was a good
Yeah,
line.
and that's the theme of it,
Yeah.
and the fact of Batman makes a choice you didn't quite expect at the end. And there's a lot of great elements. I mean, but he eats up the scene, and rightly so, in that film. It almost felt like the Two-Face part was an afterthought, in all honesty, in a way.
Mm.
I
Mm.
didn't mind it, don't get me wrong, and it made sense within the story, and I liked how they did Two-Face as far as the makeup, and he was far more like, considering the only other live action Two-Face we had was Tommy Lee Jones's one. This was by far a better, it was like this. He had the coin and everything. So you're like, okay, I can buy into it and his motivations and that.
Mm.
Um, and even the way it ends, Batman ends up having to make an ultimate choice that he knew where he would become a villain in the eyes of most of society at that point. So it does work on levels. It does work on layers. I enjoyed this one, I think, a bit better than Begins, mostly because of Ledger and the Joker, because I was floored. I was like, holy wow. The pencil scene where he's confronting the gangsters at the beginning is a wonderful, you're just like,
That's
man,
it's pretty
okay.
shocking. He puts a pencil through a guy's eye socket.
Yeah.
You don't see that happening too. It's just ta-da. Before you can even comprehend what's going on.
And it's his calmness through the whole thing, and just his demeanor and everything. It just, the whole tone of the film is definitely different than Begins, but it was really good. And like you said, yeah, it's a crime story. We actually have Batman doing detective stuff, which we
Mm-hmm.
hadn't seen since the first Batman 89. He was at least doing detective stuff. You didn't get a lot of it on screen, but he figured out the chemical compound. He was doing that, he was doing detective stuff. And in
Well, the greatest
Batman,
detective in the world. How do you not know that the guy killed his parents was still alive?
right, yeah, there's that. I know there's that, but still, he was doing stuff,
Yeah.
detective work. And then you don't see that till, again, here he's really doing that work, modifying the phones for the sonar, all of that. It was like, yeah, that's him doing detective work. Thank you. Yeah, although that wasn't this one, right? Yeah, that was in this one. He did the Batman sonar, because that's where he found the building where they had the guys taped up, and the which I loved. The hostages were actually the guys with the guns. And
Yes.
the bad guys were the posing as the hostages. Stuff like that
Mm.
really got me with this film, and that's why it blew me away. And in many respects, I enjoyed it more than Batman Begins, but still, it was like, all right, yeah, where are we going next? You've got
Mm.
me sold in.
And unfortunately, Heath Ledger passed
Yeah,
before the movie.
unfortunately.
Yeah, because I always try to imagine what that third film would have been if Heath Ledger were alive. Because now we're jumping to the grand finale, unless we count Batman v Superman in Justice League, which I'd say Ben Affleck might be one of my favorite Batmen.
I
He's
can see that. I
really,
can see
really
that.
like he's built. His voice isn't too raspy because, well, To be honest, they used a cheat code with that. They just gave him the modulator and it
Yeah.
changed his voice, which makes sense for the story. But I'm just like, so did Zack Snyder just tell Ben Affleck, just get ripped, and that was it? Because
Wait,
that's kind of what it seems like. Yeah,
and
but
what I liked about Affleck, and yes, I've gone on record. I like Batman v Superman. What works and all. I like Batman v Superman. Okay, I am not afraid to admit. I also like Last Jedi. And okay, here's my critic card. If internet feels that whatever removes my opinion,
they're
but
not critics because they got emotionally too. They get too emotional because someone disagrees with them. They're not critics.
why I liked Batfleck, which I thought was an interesting cast. And even I did a whole podcast on the casting going, this is unusual. Where are we going to go with it? And then when
Yeah.
I saw him, um, what I liked is his Batman almost felt like an older Nolan Batman
Hmm.
in a way, in many
Hmm.
ways, in his attitude, how he's had the tragedy happen, how he's more, more cynical, little more violent. It's like when I saw Batfleck, Ben Affleck's Batman, I was like, this almost feels like it's the older Nolan Batman in many ways. Like,
Hmm.
this is where this guy may have gone if, later on in life, after Dark Knight, Dark Knight Rises. Like, this is like he fell off the Batman wagon. If you didn't have the end that you have at the end of Dark Knight Rises, I'm like, this is where I could see Nolan's Batman going. And that's what I liked about Ben Affleck's Batman. you
Hmm.
know Dark Knight Rises is another beast entirely from the other. From you go from Dark Knight to Dark Knight Rises, that's another jarring jump in many
It
ways.
is stylistically it's the same. They
Right,
use
yeah.
Pittsburgh instead of Chicago, which I'm
Hmm.
like I was pretty upset about at the time. I was like, because I really want. Actually, I did get offered to crew on Rises for a bit,
Oh,
but I'd
nice.
have to drive all the way to Pittsburgh to do it.
Sure, yeah. Who wants
But
to drive to Pittsburgh? Right? No, just kidding.
well, I would have been fine with it. I actually,
Yeah.
I think I drove there before because way back when I was a kid, I drove from Chicago to New York, or
Oh,
I didn't
wow.
drive, but my
Yeah.
family did. And Rises is, I would say that's sort of tied with Begins in
Hmm.
a way because I like how Rises is Batman centric again.
Hmm.
Although it's a bit jarring. I think what you mean by jarring is if Batman's kind of a recluse in this. He after 10 years when his girlfriend died, which by the way, I don't think that was a reason he stopped becoming Batman just because Rachel died. I think he
No.
stopped becoming Batman because everything he worked toward was kind of unraveled.
Hmm.
You had Harvey Dent's downfall, which was kept a secret, and and Batman had to make himself a vigilante, which I kind of don't understand that motivation in the end. Like, why didn't he just say, "Well, the Joker killed him"? Well, then again, because Joker was there throughout the whole, like he was somewhere else at the time.
Right.
Maybe that's
Yeah.
why.
He made sure he was somewhere else whenever that happened.
Uh,
And the recluse made sense in a sense because I think it's because the Joker opened his eyes. I think he
mm,
kind of quit because he's like, shit, I did get to that edge.
mm,
I let this guy get into my head so much, and it ended up in the death of basically two of my friends.
mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, he was just done. It was like, whatever, let the world burn.
Yeah,
He was done because he didn't want to uh, become. He didn't mind them saying. I think allowing himself to be the vigilante in the city's eyes gave him extra motivation, saying, well, they'd see me as a vigilante anyway, so I don't have to do this anymore.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He's like, they see me as this, and I'm just gonna run away from the cops. It was weird. I thought it would have been interesting if the movie was about a Batman who is truly a vigilante and is working on his own
Mhm.
despite, everything around him. But like his mental toughness was kind of questioning that, but at the same time, it treated him like a human. He makes
Yeah.
mistakes like everyone else, right? And he ends up becoming Batman again. But when he does, and here was a character choice that I thought was I respect. Alfred leaves Batman. He
Hmm.
says, "You know what? You're gonna get yourself killed. I don't want the blood on my hands, and the only way you're gonna listen is if I leave." Which he doesn't listen anyways, you
No.
know. But he ends up getting. They finally make a Bane that's accurate to the comics. You know,
Hmm.
he doesn't have to be as big. You know, it's not about how big he is; it's about how
Right.
smart he is, right?
Yeah.
Until they undercut that with Talia al Ghul.
I was gonna say it,
Yeah,
to a point. I'll agree with you. To a point, they give you the Bane you wanted.
yeah,
To a point.
yeah. To a point, which another thought on that is I feel like it wasn't just Talia. I think she and Bane devised the entire
Hmm.
plan together, and he wasn't just like a dumb brute like people think. Unfortunately, they didn't do a good job of establishing that.
Mm-mm.
And the biggest flaw with The Dark Knight Rises is just how sloppy it is. Like it is like all over the place.
Hmm.
The structural behind Nolan, it falls apart at this point, and that's when we start get. This was after. Um, damn it! Why can't I remember the name?
Inception.
Inception. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. This is after Inception, and Inception itself was sloppy because everyone every 5 seconds was explaining what everything meant to me, and that's why I'm not a big fan of Inception.
Uh-huh.
You know, and I was such a Nolan fanboy at the time I bought the Blu-ray, and I'm like, I don't even like this movie that much, you know, and I owned it. Like
Sure.
I love Wally Feister's continual amazing cinematography, but
Hmm.
oh boy, that was the last movie Feister shot with Nolan before he
Right.
went on to the other guy, Hoyton Van Human, whatever.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm sorry, I don't know his name, but anyways, this movie was structurally kind of falling apart and everything, but it was the film above all Batman films that proved why Batman needs to exist. Because without Batman, Gotham fell apart
Hmm.
completely.
Hmm.
If, as Tom Hardy said in one of the press interviews, if the Joker was there to uh, set the world on fire, Bane was the one to pull the pin on the grenade.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he did. The Dark Knight Rises is a disaster film through and through,
Hmm.
where you basically have a cataclysmic event happen where humanity's trying to pick up the pieces, trying to move forward, but they can't. And it's not until Batman returns that the city is saved,
Right.
and all the work that he's done is verified. You know, he
Hmm.
feels like everything I've done makes sense now, and he earns his retirement. And Batman Begins is a, or not Batman Begins. The Dark Knight Rises is a movie that earns its place with feelings instead of logic. And in
Yeah.
terms of feelings,
Yeah.
it hits you in the feels when
Hmm.
it counts. You know, when Alfred leaves Bruce, that scene actually really delivers.
Hmm.
When Batman does get his back broken and he gets the ever living shit beat out of him by Bane, they don't shy away from it.
Hmm.
That sound they have when he hits the back, ooh, it's so loud.
Yeah.
You know, and you have the emotions there, but you have the logic that battles it, and
Hmm.
it feels inconsistent. But as a finale, it's a bit like the Return of the Jedi of the
Yeah.
Batman series,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
it's just okay, but there are certain moments that are brilliant. You know, in Return of the Jedi, all the scenes with Darth Vader and the Emperor and tossing the Emperor down the shield where somehow he survives because he cloned himself or whatever because of
Don't,
Disney.
yeah.
You
Don't
know,
get me started on that.
yeah,
Disney and
somehow
toxic
Palpatine survived.
fanboys. Anyway.
Yeah.
Uh,
You have those battling with each other, but at the end of the day, I felt like, given the circumstances, they made a triumphant sequel, which could have used more work. obviously, I think the movie that, well, not obviously, that's a blatant statement to say, but I think thought that's in a lot of fans' heads is what would have that third movie been like if Heath Ledger lived in real life? You know,
Mm-hmm.
because the Joker lives in The Dark Knight, and there's that line that he says where he says, "I think you and I are destined to do this forever,"
Mm-hmm.
which means like there was going to be a closing chapter in it with all this. My main issue with The Dark Knight Rises is it feels like Batman was only like Batman for a year and a half. So Batman Begins wasn't Batman Begins. It was just
Yeah.
it could have just been called fucking Batman, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
it would have been the same exact thing. Uh do you think it balanced them well, or do you think it was just a total train wreck? Or
No,
was it the weakest of the three? I don't know.
for me, well, I really like the Dark Knight. So you get Dark Knight Rises, and it was one of those things where I did feel it stumbled a bit. I still enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It was a different, all three of these films are definitely different. They've got their own kind of approach to it. You can tell, like you said, this is more of a disaster film. You have Bane building on the stuff that the Joker was already dropping.
Mm.
He was dropping bombs of this philosophy and that, and then like you said, it's very fitting that he said that, Tom Hardy said that, well, Bane is the guy who pulled the pin, because he's
Yeah.
like taking the Joker's philosophy and stuff to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
He's like saying, hey, look, and he actually gets some of the people behind him, because the setup and everything was good. Gotham is in trouble. You've got a guy who shows up who promises to save them, because Batman's, their hero has fallen and disappeared. So, the setup and everything I really did enjoy, but you're right. It does stumble, and it feels like it's stumbling, like they're not quite sure how they want to go about with it. Like,
Yeah.
there's parts that felt like the comic, like where he breaks Batman's back. I'm like, okay, they're pulling from the source material now. That's cool. This is Bane that we were hoping before. This is really great. Until you get to the final act, and you get the reveal with,
Yes. Ugh.
I think in my
Sorry. I
review,
was
because
feeling it again.
I think in my review, I put it the same way, because at this point I was actually doing YouTube reviews and that, and I said I did enjoy this up until the third act, mostly because of the Agul connection, and how it was like they were going great until they get to her reveal, and I'm like, it was something they didn't need to do.
Mm.
That's what got me with that, with that reveal and everything, is like, and then the minute that reveals, Bane suddenly goes almost to Bane and Batman and Robin, not like dumb, but like suddenly he's lovesick puppy following her. I'm like, this is the guy who we've watched for like 2 hours, because the movie's like, what, 2.5 hours or 2 hours for me. For most of this movie, we watched this guy make calculated decisions and
Mm.
do things that felt like a super villain. It's like, and then, oh well, no, I'm actually with Bane. He loves me, and he say I'm the one that rescued. I'm like, what? And then
Yeah.
Bane just kind of
He just sits
follows.
there and cries when she talks about their backstory.
Right? She talks about their backstory, and I'm like sitting going, why did you do do it this way? Why did you have to have her, one, be an Al Ghul, and second of all, why did you have to even put this in here? You didn't, and that's what I think took me out of it for kind of the third. Was that they added her twist and got her involved when there was nothing that I felt with the story, and it's no knock at all to her or a character, or the fact that it's within the context of the story, the Bane character and what he had done so much, and they set up so much with it. They didn't need this twist. It was completely unneeded, is what took me out of it. And I don't like when movies do that. They put a
Mm.
twist just for the sake of a twist. M. Night, I'm talking about you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, though. You don't have to. You have this great story and setup and everything, and even you've got Catwoman in there, who is kind of being a conscience to Batman. Kind of that sounding board of sorts, especially when Alfred leaves, and that it's like you have this great setup and this great final clash with Bane and Batman, and then you work in this betrayal twist love thing, and I'm like, why?
Talia
Why?
al Ghul didn't need to be in the film.
No,
Yeah,
she did not need to be Talia al Ghul at all.
she just didn't need. We didn't need her or Miranda Tate or any of that. We could have just had. God damn it, I can't remember her name now because I
Anne
don't.
Hathaway.
No, not
What?
Anne
Oh,
Hathaway.
oh,
The French girl who
oh yeah.
plays Talia al Ghul. Yeah.
Mhm.
Anyways, wonderful actress. But totally unnecessary for the film. It felt like she was just cast because she was in Inception, in a
Yeah,
way.
yeah. It did. It felt like her role was she was put in there because of Inception or because the recognizable face, or they felt like they needed to do this extra twist, which it didn't need to,
No,
and I
the movie
thought
was
it.
powerful enough. For God's sakes, you fucking like made everyone. You create. They predicted COVID, with Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah, they did because people were locked in their homes for six months at that time. I think it was 6 months at some point because the time frame really that's what helped me got me too with it was the scope of
Oh God,
this.
yeah, it makes because like it takes so much time in the beginning, and you're seeing like kind of like every day of Batman's life or Bruce Wayne's life, I
Yeah.
should say, and then all of a sudden it like jumps to like 6 months, and you're like, what? Wait, what? And then of course the plot holes in the movie.
Well,
Oh dear Lord, you could drive a dump truck. Or I would say a monster truck with steel tires because those tires are going to go flat with those plot holes.
yeah, just the whole segmenting off all of Gotham. I mean, if maybe they hadn't put it in the real world, I would be okay. But I'm like, wait, what? You're telling me that powers that be would allow this to happen to an entire city? Like,
Well,
there's,
even the
you know,
president gives up. He's like, we don't negotiate with terrorists, but we understand situations. And I'm going, oh no, man.
what?
Now we're
Yeah,
cutting to the
yeah,
presidents and we're doing all, and like, this is going too far. This is doing too much. This is when I think Christopher Nolan, I don't think he had a plan for a movie with Heath Ledger, but maybe like a German of idea. Like, we could maybe do like there were places to go with the Joker, and with that taken away, it hurt the movie. And
yeah,
then I think maybe there were some looming deadlines that affected some things. I'm not sure. But then again, I would say some of it is Christopher Nolan's ego because, I mean, look at the whole Tenant debacle. He basically
yeah,
told people, like, in the beginning of a pandemic, just put on a mask, go to the theater, shut up, and see my movie.
yeah. He by Dark Knight Rises, he's doing, as one of my good friends would say, sniffing his own farts,
Yeah.
so to speak, at that point. And don't get me wrong, I have mad respect for the talent and especially his early work, but I think when Dark Knight Rises came up, he had reached this level and developed this following, especially through social media, and that people just praising his work so much. I think it's what you were saying is that kind of like with Burton and Batman Returns, he didn't really have someone that could sit there and go, maybe you shouldn't do this, or maybe we should dial it back, or maybe we should really make
Mm-hmm.
this choice with it. Do you really need, Ra's al Ghul's daughter in it? Does that really fit?
Yeah.
But at this point, Nolan was so big, I got the feeling that very few people could tell him no.
Yeah. Because
You
he,
know,
he, he resurrected Batman.
right?
And
Yeah,
he created the whole reboot trend.
mhm.
Batman Begins was like, it's not a remake, it's a reboot.
Reboot. Yeah,
And now, since 2005, every movie has tried to do a reboot, including Batman now,
yeah.
which is what Matt Reeves is doing. And I have to say, it was a wonderful ending to Dark Knight Rises.
Oh yeah.
I do like what Christopher Nolan does, where he wraps
Hmm.
everything up in a nice little montage, and you see. Okay, here's one thing. Speaking of the ending, that really kind of was shocking
Hmm.
in a way. Is like we're all like, man, what's gonna happen at the end of the Dark Knight Rises? Like everyone was wondering that before the movie came out. Well, the movie fucking tells you what's gonna happen like 15 minutes in or something. When Alfred's like, I imagine being in this very specific restaurant in the middle of Italy, and you're sitting across from me, and you say nothing to you, and I say, yeah, blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, they had that scene. And I'm like, oh, yeah, how did I not see that happening? Like, they put in a plant, right? And then,
Foreshadowing.
yeah, yeah. And then eventually the plant grows at the end, but yeah, it kind of, in some ways, it was predictable. It's like, oh, that's gonna be Talia al Ghul. Too many cooks in the kitchen. I
Yeah.
would say. I would say Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character. Like, why was he there? Why did Batman just immediately tell him his identity? He's like, I know it's you because I saw that look in your eyes. Like a look in your eyes, in his eyes made you know. So like every single orphan just has like the innate ability to tell if another orphan is a superhero because every single superhero ever is a fucking orphan.
Well, that was another thing too. They didn't need to do, that was another one of those where, oh, he's gonna be Robin, and sure enough, oh, they call you Robin, and it's like,
Yeah.
but why put this in there? I mean, I know they're all about franchise and trying to do a spin on it, but I'm like sitting here going, you again didn't need this element in here. Don't get me wrong, I love Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I will
Yeah.
watch him in anything. I love him as an actor. I've
Yeah.
enjoyed everything he was in. I mean, Brick, I own Brick, and that was one of the first films I reviewed on my YouTube channel. I love Brick. Brick is amazing.
That is a wonderful. I think that's Ryan Johnson. Like, yeah, I hate The Last Jedi with a passion, but I think Ryan Johnson. I don't entirely blame Ryan Johnson for that. I think he had some deadlines and he had some incredible ideas. I actually like the idea of a dejected Luke Skywalker and all that. I just
Mhm.
feel like he didn't have the time to
Right.
flesh out those ideas. And Brick's a wonderful example of a movie where it seemed like he had a lot of time. He gave it that 1930s Humphrey Bogart sort of dialogue, and he translated it to high school kids, and it
He
was
did a
wonderful.
no he did a freaking 30s noir
Yeah.
movie in a setting of high school, something you'd never seen before, and he had a talented young cast,
Hmm.
including Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Yeah.
And I loved him, but his part didn't necessarily need to be in Dark Knight Rises, because there was nothing really. And the reason I say that is because the way it was written, nothing was calling really to it that it added anything. You had a big enough story with Bane taking over all of Gotham for 6 months. You have
Hmm.
Batman breaking his back. You've got enough big elements in here to where you don't need the twist with Natalia, with Al Ghul. You don't need, oh, he's going to become Robin. You didn't need those because you had such meat with everything else, that those elements just kind of weaken it a bit. And like you said, and then there's the plot holes as well, because you're
Yeah.
going almost too grandiose.
Hmm.
Which, if Heath Ledger was alive, it would have been interesting to see the film they could have came up with.
Yeah.
um
How they continued that relationship together. Like you could imagine the nuance, but it could have been better than
yeah.
Dark Knight because imagine the nuance between the characters. Imagine Batman maybe finally admitting, you know what, maybe you're a little right.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm like you, but I'm
Dude,
not entirely like you because I believe in the good in humanity where you
mhm.
believe in the bad, and there's always the two to equal each other out.
It literally, I could imagine easily Nolan doing a Silence of the Lambs type thing with Batman and Joker.
That would be
Wouldn't have
fucking
that been
amazing. That'd be
wouldn't that have
fucking
been
amazing.
amazing, to where
Yeah.
Batman continually is like sneaking into Arkham because he's got a new villain and he's trying to understand him. So he's going to the one guy who understands not only him but villains, and he's talking to the Joker, and then the Joker just, plays him. I mean, that would have been
Breaks out all of Arkham.
right.
Yeah.
It would have been interesting to see that, and what we get with Dark Knight Rises. And we haven't mentioned the Hans Zimmer pairing with
Oh,
Nolan.
now
you
that's
know
probably my favorite score is
yeah.
of the Nolan trilogy is Dark Knight Rises. Bane's theme, basa basa desha desha basa basa.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful score. I mean, Hans Zimmer, he does wonderful with the music in here. He does give it his own identity. He has little hints and throwbacks to Elfman's score, but he definitely makes it his own.
which part
And
was
it
Elfman? I'm trying to think.
hmm?
Here. I'm trying to think where in the score it was like
Well,
Elfman's.
just his approach with some of the instrumentation, not so much in this one as in Dark Knight, the Dark Knight
Mm.
had
Oh
had
yeah, especially like the
has
first one. Bum bum
yeah
bum. Like the Batman Begins theme is very Elfman-esque
yeah
in a way. Not very,
yeah.
but it's
It's the spirit.
superhero-esque.
It's a spirit of those. It
Yeah.
definitely is the spirit of those. You can tell he realized what he had, what was a follow up, and just he still made it his own. And the music does add quite a bit to Dark Knight Rises actually, and it is probably the best score out of the three
Mm.
with it. And this could have been an interesting film, and they had one, but for me, I felt where they were going, I didn't like. I like the ending, the emotional thing with the cafe, and you're right, it does button things up nicely.
Yeah.
There were just a lot of questions at the end of it, a lot of things that I was just
Yeah.
like, really? Yeah, and they get explained in supplemental material. Well, I think the graphic novel explains how he escaped the bat wing, you know.
Oh, how did he escape the back wing?
If I remember correctly, he ejects and has it on remote control. He dives into the water before it does the explosion. I think that's how it was.
That's
I,
still stupid because that
I
could cause a fucking tidal wave and he died. I don't know. But then again, it's a nuclear bomb.
it's a
He could have
well
just
they
ejected and used the. But then again, like he had a stab wound and all the way like a stab wound, he's just like, I'm okay.
yeah.
Like,
you know, it would have been a ballsy move to kill Batman at
that
the
would have
end.
been awesome.
Like truly
Like
ballsy,
dead, dead. Yeah.
like dead, like just this going out grandiose. You see on camera bright flash while he's in the bat wing as it blows up.
Burns his flesh off.
Just no question he actually dies. That would have been a ballsy move,
I
and I
think
think
that would have been a far more impactful ending than no, he's okay.
well, not only that, but it would have fit the arc of of Batman through the Nolan verse a lot
Yes.
better had you actually had this Batman die.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I'm as we've established, I'm a huge Batman fan. I don't necessarily want to, but with this trilogy being its own beast, I would have had no problem at all with him actually dying at the end, you know, and it would have been even more impactful because it would have been, could you imagine that scene, how much more impactful that would be with Alfred at the table at the end like they did, but looking over at an empty table versus
Mm.
you know Bruce Wayne and his girl sitting
Which,
there,
uh,
just have
by the way,
have
why trust Selena Kyle after all that? Even she's like, why do you
right.
trust me?
Right. Wouldn't it have been even more impactful if you had, because Michael Caine could pull it off,
Yeah.
just looking over at the empty chair, this table where it would have been, and just have a solemn look just come over his face a bit as he takes a drink.
Yeah.
And then
Like
you
he's
fade to
never going to
back.
be back and he always just wants to see him, but he knows he's never going to be there.
Exactly. I'm like,
Yeah.
man, that would have been a greater bookend to this overall story of where you were taking Batman.
Yeah.
And even with everything else, if they would have did that, I think it would have meant a lot more to me. I still enjoyed it, don't get me wrong, I still enjoyed Dark Knight Rises quite a bit, but it just, looking at it going, some of the choices they could have made would have made it even like better.
Yeah.
Like
that was the problem. I mean, you had the tragic death of an actor, but you also had a director who just was too into himself at that time. I think and of course he had deadlines and budget and blah blah blah. But it still doesn't excuse the fact that it's like, yeah, but you made two other Batman films and they were fantastic. And that's why I'm like, yeah, is Dark Knight my least favorite? I don't know. I can't separate them because they're such different movies. Although I will say, Rises is a bit like Batman Begins. The Dark Knight Rises is like, it has the ensemble of Batman Begins, or it has. I should say, I should rewind myself. It has. It has the only Robin Williams can do that perfectly.
yes.
Dark Knight Rises has the ensemble of The Dark Knight, which even the title's kind of lazy. They just
Yeah.
added Rises at the end. And then it also has the center focus of Batman, and it has the visual look of Dark Knight, where it's a real city.
Yeah.
So it's like both movies put together for a third film,
Right.
but it's kind of more of a Frankenstein
It
in
is. It
some
is.
ways than it is a concise final act. Although emotionally triumphant, it's just
It
kind of hollow in a lot of ways because you're left with more questions than emotional gratification.
it's far more piecemealed together than,
Happy
you
meal.
know, the happy meal, so to speak. It's definitely patchworked a bit more than the other two for sure.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. But now
I mean,
we have. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying, don't get me wrong, I enjoy all three Nolan films. I enjoy a lot of work of Nolan's. I think his later work, though, is by far more, not necessarily chaotic, but just not nearly as tight as his earlier work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we go. I mean, I want to talk about Batman centric live action movies, but yeah, you do talk about uh, Batman v Superman, or I mentioned it, and then we.
Mhm.
I do like it. There are parts of it I like. I fucking love the warehouse scene. That scene is awesome. That's like pure, and that was Batman. They went back to Batman killing, and people had a problem with that again. But again, I'm fine with Batman killing. I'll just say it, you know,
Well,
because
I didn't mind it because it, in all honesty, if you look at the arc they do with Batman,
Mhm.
it's similar. I know I'm going out on a limb here,
No, no, no.
but it's similar to the arc they took with Luke in a way in The Last Jedi. And I think that's what bugs a lot of people, is the fact that a person who has become disenchanted with their own story in a way,
Yeah.
or their own purpose, they've become disenchanted. In Batman v Superman, I liked cranky Batman. I thought they established it. I'm not saying that that film's, I enjoy it. I'm saying they definitely clumsily go through material where they could have really made something special,
Mm.
but they were too busy rushing, trying to keep up with the Joneses rather than just staying in their own lane and doing their own thing. But Batman, I could see him, with all the crap he's gone through, becoming what Ben Affleck's Batman was in
Frank
Batman v
Miller
Superman.
Batman.
Frank Miller Batman. I could see that because that's his character has always been. He just witnessed so much stuff that eventually, yeah. And you get a similar thing with Rises, only instead of him getting cranky old, he just becomes a recluse and decides to give up the cowl altogether.
Yeah.
You know, whereas the Batman and Batman v Superman, he just turns on full chaos. He just goes full ballistic on
Yep.
villains. And
Which made sense for his character. Like you get that little shot of Robin's old outfit in a
yeah,
display. You get okay,
and it's still
shit
got the
went
Joker,
down.
and it's still got the Joker's, spray paint on it. He didn't
Oh
like wash it
yeah,
off or anything.
it's a
That,
reminder. Yeah.
he keeps it as a reminder, showing you, man, that was his breaking point. We don't get to see it, but you realize that was his, like, yeah, he's tired of anyone being too super powered or whatnot. So along comes, Superman, and you understand his fears in that. Again, they execute it poorly, but there's a lot of great themes and things that they explored had they handled it more with care in Batman v Superman. That would have made that, I think, a really decent film. They just had too many producers, and again, too many cooks in the kitchen trying to keep up with Marvel. I think if they would have just
Mm.
forget trying to establish something that, let's do what Marvel's doing, and still just made it their own, I think that film would have been solid, a lot more solid. It really could have been, and Dark Knight Rises, same thing. I think, even with the unfortunate situation, I think if they would have taken a step back, going, okay, Ledger unfortunately passed. We are going to do a third film, but take an extra beat. Hell, take an extra year and really put together, like, how are we going to do this let's rethink it rather than, oh, we got to come up with something, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And I love the ideas that you brought forth. Like, I would love to have seen that scene where Robin gets killed, and
Mhm.
you don't even have to have Joker in it if you don't want to show Joker because those are big shoes to fill, big clown shoes to fill. You could just show the aftermath. Just
You
show
could,
him holding him, crying, the building destroyed. I still find it kind of hilarious that there was at the time that comic came out where Robin got killed, there was a huge
yeah.
voting system publicly saying, should we leave Robin alive? Should we kill him? And everyone unanimously decided for him to be dead. Which, like, wow,
Wow,
okay,
that's harsh.
we got
No,
it.
you're right. They, rather than a nightmare scene, it would have been great to see him haunted by showing Batman walking up to the corpse of, kind of like what they did in Teen Titans in a way.
Mm,
Uh, for, or Titans, not Teen Titans, but Titans on the HBO, the third season. I haven't watched all of it, but just in the beginning, they do a scene, spoiler, little spoiler, but that involves this exact incident. And it, you could have done that in the movie where he walks up and finds the dead body of Robin. You wouldn't even have to show a face. You could have had any actor kind of just, you know,
yeah.
with the spray paint on there, and then cut back to him staring at the case, and boom, you've got your extra motivation, especially show him getting angry or whatnot. you
Mm,
know um they could have handled it better. I think what hurts Batman v Superman is the fact of the rushing and trying to stay with the Marvel,
yeah.
and that's what's hurt a lot of the DC properties since Marvel did its thing. What's interesting now with the Batman, and I'm tying it back around with the Batman coming around, is I think Warner Brothers has an opportunity, and it looks like they're kind of going that direction with the Black Adam movie, the
Mm,
next Aquaman film, and what it sounds like their approach is the next Shazam film, and that with this, they have an opportunity to stay on even ground with MCU. And I know that's blasphemy, but it's true, because after phase 4 or whatever, after Endgame, Marvel kind of has to start from scratch again. So
mm,
DC and Warner Brothers have an opportunity, and it looks like they're starting to kind of take it to where they can kind of be even with Marvel again. Because even though Marvel's established all of this, did this world building, you look at the way Endgame ends, and we're seeing it now. They're going that route, but they're having to start from scratch. So DC and Marvel, kind of, DC has a second chance, I think. And the Batman looks like they might do it. I know it's a 3-hour epic, and people are like, oh, but I'm like, if written right and paced well, you're not going to notice.
mm.
We've you know, Endgame. If you put Endgame and could you imagine had they not split that movie initially, like it was going to be one movie before they put Infinity War and End? Could you
God,
imagine
whoa.
the 5-hour, sub 6-hour
Yeah,
epic
I think
that would?
audiences would have fallen asleep or something like that. It would have been bad. The thing I always loved that DC did, and I kind of say, I know why you're the DC shill if you want to call yourself that, but I like how DC has always had a unique voice for each of their heroes, where
Mhm.
Marvel's stuff, it's the same exact formula told again and
Right.
again and again and again. Even if you got Chloe Zhao while she's smoking a peace pipe, filming the atmosphere with Eternals, it's still very
Still a
much a
Marvel movie.
Marvel film. Yeah,
Yeah.
same kind of music, same kind of jokes, same kind of everything. Where DC, like, yeah, it's different. They try to copy Marvel now is their problem. DC should have just said in the first place, we just want to tell good stories and we don't
Mhm.
care about connecting this stuff together.
And they did that with, I will say their three strongest films will be Aquaman, will be Wonder Woman, and would be Shazam.
Hmm.
Shazam, for me, out of the all, I like them all, but for me, those ones felt like they're trying to do a little different. They might be still trying to be a bit Marvel, but they're doing their thing, especially with Wonder Woman, and especially with Shazam. Shazam hides, I've mentioned this before, but it hid a big reveal that only a deep cut comic book fans would probably recognize, but at the same time, they hid that. That
Mm.
was not hinted at in the trailer or any of the press material or anything. But when they did what they did at the end of Shazam, I'm like, wow.
You mean
And it was
Superman in the end with the lunch tray, or?
no, before that with the family.
Oh yeah, see, even I don't know. I'm not. I've been a
Mm.
cinematic comic book guy, not a
Yeah.
comic book guy. Yeah.
Well, I looked it up because it threw me off. I was like, wow, but what they do with the family, with the other kids at the end of Shazam, that's actually in the comics. That actually does happen.
Mm.
It surprised me they did that because I'm like, that's a different twist that works. Okay, that actually works, and it sets up a number of wonderful things for it later on. And I think they're best when they are doing. Aquaman had its own formula from the other ones. It was a little more Marvel formula, but then again, still it felt like they were getting a grasp of what was going to work for them. And the audiences like those ones the best, you know. But they do still have their own unique identities from property to property. Aquaman movie did not feel like a Wonder Woman movie, which did not feel like Man of Steel by any means, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And I get what you're saying with that. Whereas, yeah, the Marvel movie, and I think part of the thing with the Marvel movies of why they start blending together is because you have so many crossover characters. Like, I feel bad for, I think why No Way Home works so well for many reasons, and why I did enjoy it a lot.
Hmm.
It's the first of the 3 films where I felt he was actually on his own. Like, Spider-Man got a
Yeah.
Spider-Man film,
Which
even
is
with the
funny because it has all the other Spider-Men, but it feels like the most Spider-Man of the Spider-Man films because it's really about this Spider-Man, this Tom Holland Spider-Man.
right. It's about Tom Holland's Spider-Man. He doesn't have his crutches. It doesn't bring in too many forced It has Doctor Strange, but Doctor Strange's character, unlike, no offense to, I love Robert Downey Jr. and I love Iron Man. Unlike the Iron Man character, his character works in a little better because while he's got the ego, it's just a different character versus Iron Man, who seemed to be continuously holding Peter's hand. You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
Strange, not so much. He's just helping out. Okay, we live in the same town. That makes sense, you know. And you don't have as many flashbacks to, oh, Captain America. You know, we've pushed all of that aside. Holland really gets a chance to explore his Spider-Man, and it feels like a Spider-Man movie, like a comic. Like, I picked up a Spider-Man comic, and it's him. Yeah, you have familiar faces, but it's still focused on his character. He's dealing with it, and they do kind of a reset at the end of it for it as well, to where
Hmm.
they're starting fresh with his character. So I liked all that. But yeah, the Marvel films really later on were relying on, you know, you get, let's face it, Captain America's Civil War. There's a reason why a lot of people call it Avengers 2.5.
Yeah, I never thought Civil War was a Captain America film. That was an Avengers
No.
film. That it was like, hey, we know you guys didn't like Age of Ultron so much, so here's this instead.
Yeah,
It felt a little bit like that.
you know, so with the Batman now coming out, it looks like their plan, it's amazing how many comic, appreciate, folks, just sit back. If you're a comic book fan or a comic book movie fan, appreciate how many comic book movies you are getting in 2022. Okay,
Hmm.
I'm just putting that out. You're getting one practically every month, either
Hmm.
DC or Marvel. And what I saw from a little bit from Black Adam, I'm digging that quite a bit. You know, yeah, give me some of that. You know, you get a visions of Dr. Fate, and you know, they're pulling out some characters that you're not going to be familiar with, you
Hmm.
know, and giving them screen time. Hawkman looks awesome.
Yeah.
um
Give them an
you know,
individual vision, and that's what works. That's why Richard Donner's Superman worked. That's why
right.
Tim Burton's Batman works. That's why Christopher Nolan's Batman worked. They're different visions. That's why maybe Matt Reeves' Batman will work. I
Mhm.
know. I'm excited for it. I have my concerns. I feel like everyone looks like a little kid in it, but then again, I'm babyface too, so whatever.
There is that, but I'm curious. It has piqued my interest because of the very different approaches they're taking, it feels like it did when I put in Arkham Asylum for the game
Yeah.
quite a bit. It has that that Arkham universe feel to it,
Yeah.
which is, if that's the direction they're going, that's fine, because I loved that world. I haven't played Arkham Knights, but I've played all the other Arkhams, and I still loved them to various degrees.
Yeah.
And if that's the approach they're taking with the new one, I'm for it,
Yeah.
because again, that's another own identity of it. So
Yeah, that's why I particularly kind of get more excited for movies like the Batman than I do for
mhm.
well, all the Spider-Man I was excited for, but like a
Yeah.
lot of the just some of the Marvel stuff, I'm like, oh, who? Moon Knight? You mean fucking Batman? Okay, whatever.
That's why I said,
Yeah,
and I was like, oh, Moonlight. I'm sorry, folks,
Moonlight.
Marvel
Now that's a
fans.
different movie.
Yeah, Moonlight. Sorry, but I'm like
I want
Moon
to see
Knight.
the Moonlight version of Moon Knight, where like Moon Knight, like he has a past connection with a person, and he gives him a sandy handy in the beach, you know.
Moon Knight, when I saw the trailer, is like, so Batman permanently gets damaged by Scarecrow's gas and decides to wear white.
Yeah.
Okay, I like,
Yeah, exactly. This is like racist Batman. No, I don't know. They cast Oscar Isaac, and I'm like, he wasn't so good as Apocalypse, and now he's doing another goofy accent. I don't
oh,
know, man. Like,
oh.
it feels like Marvel's like, oh yeah, well we'll show you DC. We can be dark too. I'm like, no, you can't. Like,
No, no,
don't try. Just stay in
they
your playground. We'll stay in ours.
and they should be, and that's fine, and I think it's good to have the variety. I think people miss that. I don't think every comic book film should be the Marvel formula, and I don't think all the Marvel formula. That's why I'm kind of excited for, I'm excited for Multiverse of Madness. While it does seem to
Yeah,
have some of the Marvel elements, it also looks a lot crazier. Like, it was just like why I love Doctor Strange,
it's a
was the
Sam Raimi
fact.
film. They're
Yeah.
just letting Sam Raimi go nuts with it and be like, just make Evil Dead with Doctor Strange. Like, fuck
Oh,
yeah, I
I'd be
want to see
for, oh
that.
hell yeah. But it's why I like Doctor Strange so much as well. I like the Marvel films that break out of that formula a little bit, break away from those core phase one characters, and explore these other. You've got such a plethora of characters to draw from, and we get to explore these, and you get to do something different because people aren't quite so familiar with them. And I was wondering how they were going to sell magic to the MCU universe, who have had this staple of whatever. And Doctor Strange came along and did it, and did
Yeah.
it well. And I'm like, I'm in. I want more Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know.
it's not like Batman where it's like super. That's what made Dark Knight Rises not work with the plot holes, because it's so
Yeah.
grounded in reality that you notice the plot holes way more when I'm like, hey, that's Pittsburgh. That's where I go to my local sandwich shop, and now it's supposed to be down Earth, but then all of a sudden all the bullshit happens in that movie.
The resurrection and the live. Yeah. No, yeah.
Yeah. But I thank you for coming on. My God, we almost got to 3 hours. This is 2 hours and 47 minutes that we've been doing
we
this.
we we ran through this. Hey, no,
No, thank you
I'm
for coming on. I told you we are gonna go down the rabbit hole, and yeah,
we
thank you for
did.
coming down with it with me. I guess we could
Yeah.
call it the Bat Cave. We were going
The
down the
Bat
Bat
Cave. We
Cave
went
and
we went down into the Bat Cave. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, deep into where the
Um,
bat. Which man, Batman. I don't even think he like in 2020 he would be the scariest. He's like, I'm a bat. I have COVID. Which I come from a bat cave. You really want to like his only move, dude? I walk around without a mask. I cover everything but this.
but my mouth. I cover everything but my mouth,
Oh
and I
yeah, put my
cough on
nose
you.
in my mouth. Yeah, he'll just. I'll talk to you in this voice. Let me enunciate everything.
No, don't punch me, man.
Yeah, exactly. He'll cough in his leathery glove of justice and just rub
Leathery.
his like COVID all over you. Which, oh man, that reminds me. Have you ever had Batman cereal? What's like the craziest Batman merchandise you ever got?
Oh wow, Batman
I'll tell
cereal.
Batman calzone. When we review the Batman, we got to eat a Batman calzone. We'll have that.
I've got to get a Batman
And they're
calzone
good
for
too.
it.
They
They
taste so
are.
fuck. Like if you eat like the front and the back of it, oh my god. If you just eat Batman's ass, it tastes amazing.
these posters
Oh
came
yeah.
came with my pizza, and they're
What?
friggin'
How'd
awesome.
you get those
Yeah,
in your pizza? Man,
yeah,
that's we don't have
the
that in
Batman
Chicago.
calzone. When I walked in, I ordered the Batman calzone, and she got it, and then she handed me this, and it's cardboard too. This isn't just paper.
Oh yeah, that looks thick.
This
Yeah.
is thicker material. And I'm like, oh, cool. So then when we went, my son and I wanted it again because it was good. So we went a couple of weeks later, and suddenly I got an even better one with the interesting Batmobile. I'm like, well,
Now that
shit,
Batmobile. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
you're gonna make me order this like every week to get a dinner.
I think I've ordered in total so far. I got it once at the Laugh Factory, and then we got it again, and then I ordered like two. I think I've gotten 4 calzones so far.
They're good. They're
Little
good.
Caesars is biggest so much. Yeah, I mean it's not like the best pizza in the world. It's not like a hand toss bomb. It's like you literally like scan the card, and like that was a new thing I'd realized. Like you scan it in the
Yeah.
store, and then the thing opens up, and they're like, "Okay, here's your pizza."
Here's your pizza if you order it ahead of time. Or the what was great is the Batman calzone is a take and bake too, so they had it already made a couple of times. The couple times I've gotten it are just the
Mm.
bake and take or whatever. So
Oh, that sounds so good. I'm gonna get a
yeah,
bacon. That's probably why it tasted so different in Chicago than when I got it. Because when I was in Chicago, I'm like, this is so fresh. Like what? And that's probably why.
yeah, they keep them fresh because they're the ones they're like they're $5 pizzas where you come in and just say, hey, I want a pepperoni, and they're like, okay, here you go, $5.
Yeah. Or you
Um,
get a Jokeroni.
or a Jokeroni. I'd eat
Now,
that. I would eat that.
were those pizzas really colored
No,
that way? Oh my god, that's
no,
disgusting. Like
no. They
because it was
just
like
that
green and
was just photoshopped, but I would still eat that. I fully admit I'd eat at least one
I don't care.
Jokeroni.
I'd eat anything. Well, unless it has vegetables and is healthy for me, then I won't eat it.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, it's great. Anyways, Mark Crosscheck, Special Mark Productions. We can find you at,
Awesome.
and that's on
Yeah.
Twitter or Instagram. You where else? I'm thinking
I'm on
TikTok. You know
TikTok.
that
Yeah,
website the former president tried to ban.
yeah. YouTube, Patreon, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. I'm everywhere on all the social stuff. But yeah, specialmarkproductions.com is where it's got a link to everything. Just finished up editing our episode on Dead Heat from 1988.
Ooh.
Yeah, I did an interview with Patrick Reed Johnson, who directed a comedy film called Spaced Invaders, and he he actually directed a second unit on Dead Heat, and we talked a little about that. That was 5 years ago, one of my first interviews, and so now we're actually reviewing all of Dead Heat. So lots of stuff on there for people. Hopefully they find interesting. And yeah, I got 1 minute reviews on TikTok. We're
Yeah.
also under Special Mark Productions there, and I've been doing it about 6 months and almost have 1,000 followers. Don't ask me
Whoa.
why.
I
I
told you, man, you know what you're doing. You know exactly what you're doing. Like you're gonna blow up, man.
minute reviews, but yeah, if you're all at all interested, yeah. But
I wish I
I'm
could pull off the minute reviews like you do. I see it, I'm like, whoa, he did that sober? Like how did he? That's amazing.
yeah, do it. I do it sober, but no,
Yeah.
and I appreciate all your stuff and being on. It's an honor to be on this always, and just to talk films. I do mean that, because I'm just some schmuck in the middle of Wisconsin. So the fact that I get to do stuff like this with very cool people like you,
Well, I love
um,
Wisconsin. I have my place in Door County, and that's when Sexy Mode comes on.
there you
You know,
go.
it's
I've seen Sexy Mode. It's hard to
yeah. Wait till you guys
hard
see
to
that
resist.
Batman Forever.
So
Oh my god! I just looked at it. I'm like, was that me? Like, clothing does
you
make a
were
difference. Yeah.
you were working it. You were definitely working it.
I was ready, man. That's right when I think that was like right when I shed like all that weight, and I'm like,
Mm,
all right. So,
let's
anyways,
do
this is too
this.
personal. But
But yeah,
uh,
the Batman coming out. I'm interested. I'm curious. I'm more curious now than when I first saw the first trailer. And
yeah,
now I especially if they're saying it's a little more horror and all that. I'm like, I'm all in.
it's
I'll
like
go see it.
7. I think. I
Yeah.
think that's the influence, like early David Fincher
Hmm.
films. You know,
And,
before.
and I'll be interested to see where they go with this. And we also are getting Batman 89 back with the new Flash movie coming out.
Yeah, I'm wondering how that's
So
gonna work because he's also with Batgirl. And I'm like, do I want him to go into all these? And I'm like, you know what? They always had magical, crazy stuff. Like, if you can get bitten by cats by your fingers and somehow it gives you cat-like powers, then I'm not sure if that's really how it happened, but I don't know. It's close.
Uh,
Or if you fall into a vat of chemicals
you fall in
and
a vat of chemicals, you become a very smart, insane villain. You know, you never know.
yeah, the Jack Nicholson, he's the MVP Joker. I'm seeing if I can get to 3 hours of Matt Reeves' time. Ha
you want to
ha!
know? You want to know how I get these scars?
Yeah, you want to know how I got these scars? It's actually not that interesting.
No, makeup guy in the truck. About 5 hours. That's how I got these.
That
Scars.
was the fastest. They applied that makeup on Heath Ledger in like 20 minutes.
Yeah, I know, it was
That's
insane.
insane. It usually takes 5 hours, 6 hours. You know, the Elephant Man. I think John Hurt was in that trailer or whatever makeup room they had. I think for like 12 hours
Yeah.
on top of the 12-hour filming day. So that's a
Mhm.
22-hour day if
Yeah.
they didn't go overtime.
Yeah.
So that's dedication, man. Holy moly. But yeah, thank you. Check
You bet.
Mark out at Special Mark Productions. Check me out at YPA Reviews. The YPA stands for You'll Probably Agree. And we'll see you later. Batman out. I'm not clever.
Same bat time, same bat
place.
channel.
Where's Rachel? Where are they?
Where's my bat calzone?
Yeah, where's the calzone? My bat voice cracked.